Chapter 248, Jian Wushuang showed up. Chapter 248, Jian Wushuang showed up. A man in coarse clothes was brought to the drill ground under the watchful gazes of many experts. His hair was gray and his face had a mustache on it, showing that he had experienced many vicissitudes of life. People couldn't feel any spiritual power from him. When he was brought to the center of the drill ground, he raised his head slowly. Deep in his eyes, there was a boundless void. His eyes calmly swept from Qi Luosheng to left and right messengers and then to those experts present at the scene. After a glance, he lounged in everybody's presence and took out a pot of wine, drinking alone. Many surrounding experts felt perturbed by his behavior. He is Jian Nantian. Jian Wushuang's father. He is Jian Nantian. Quite ordinary. Almost all of those present had heard of Jian Nantian 1 month ago, thus they were curious about him. After they saw him, however, most of them secretly despised him and thought that he was quite meager. They didn't see anything special in him. If they didn't know his identity before, perhaps all of them would think he was just an ordinary man or even a beggar. I heard Jian Nantian's name 1 month ago and knew that he would be executed in this gathering. I had never expected he was such a man. That's Jian Wushuang's father. Too ordinary. Even we couldn't tell apart him from a beggar on the street. Many people said that. Of course, there were some people, most of whom were knowledgeable experts, that narrowed their eyes when they saw Jian Nantian. This man is not simple. Being stared at by so many people, even he will be killed by Blood Feather Tower, yet nothing can be seen in his eyes but calmness. Indifferent, he is so indifferent. It seems that the whole world is nothing to him, experts from all of the sects, or people from Blood Feather Tower, they are all the same in his eyes. Indifferent, but in other words, he is aloof. Aloof. Upon hearing this word, the people became restless. They asked themselves if they were him, what would they do? All of them could not drink alone whilst indifferently ignoring all of the people present. Who could do that? This only suggested that Jian Nantian was not simple. Young master, is that man your brother's father? Above the void, the gray-robed elder narrowed his eyes. What's wrong? Wang Yuan looked over at him questioningly. Nothing, I just feel that his state of mind is extraordinary. Having lived for 200 years, I couldn't catch him in a state of mind. It's a pity that his Dantian was destroyed, otherwise, he has the hope of reaching divine transcendence in the future, the gray-robed elder said seriously. Oh. Wang Yuan was surprised and he narrowed his eyes slightly. His father was locked with the spirit-locking spell by Blood Feather Tower before. Now, they bring him to the drill ground without the soul-seizing formation, so clearly they are afraid that the third brother will not come. On the high platform of the drill ground on Heartless Island, the bloody and wicked figure of Qi Luosheng glanced at Jian Nantian. Then his cold voice sounded on the drill ground. Gentlemen, you might not be familiar with this man. Let me introduce him to you. His name is Jian Nantian, who was famous in the Tianzong dynasty years ago, however, he was caught by Blood Feather Tower, which took us a lot of effort, Qi Luosheng said with a cold smile. Besides, he's the father of someone that has made a big disturbance in the Tianzong dynasty. His son is Jian Wushuang, who is known as the first genius of Tianzong dynasty. Many experts on the drill ground were listening carefully. The Tianzong dynasty has not been tranquil in recent years, especially the Blood Feather Tower. We have been provoked many times, and someone even slaughtered the strongholds of Blood Feather Tower and killed experts there. I suppose that you do not need me to tell you who he is, Qi Luosheng said. Many experts on the drill ground were contemptuous of his words. They knew that it was Blood Feather Tower who frequently attempted to assassinate Jian Wushuang, therefore Jian Wushuang retaliated against them furiously. However, what Qi Luosheng said implied that it was Jian Wushuang who provoked Blood Feather Tower first. Qi Luosheng's cold eyes looked around, and he said in a deep voice, "Today I invite all of you coming to the Heartless Island to listen to my experience and comprehension. More importantly, it is to warn those sects who are ready to make trouble or benefit from the trouble. Blood Feather Tower is still number 1. Being the overlord in the Tianzong dynasty, Blood Feather Tower won't allow anybody to provoke us. Anyone that provokes Blood Feather Tower will die. After saying that, a terrifying pressure emitted out from Qi Luosheng. The force covered the entirety of the drill ground. Many experts who were standing there suddenly looked solemn. Some of the weaker ones were even more horrified. However, as soon as Qi Luosheng finished speaking, suddenly, a loud and clear shout rose seemingly from the sky. Anyone that provokes Blood Feather Tower will die. I don't think so. At the very moment of this voice rising, rumble. A stream of terrible killing intent rose from somewhere far away. Under the sweeping of slaughter origin, the horrible killing intent flew to the 9th heaven. Immediately, the whole heaven and earth turned silent. He's arrived. Has he really come? With a sword in hand, he is invincible. Jian Wushuang. The entire drill ground was in an uproar, and everybody's eyes turned to the source of the killing intent at that moment. It came from outside of Heartless Island, which was quite a distance away from it. Whoosh! 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 Lots of experts of Yin-Yang Void Realm flew up high and stood in the void to look at that direction. It comes from the back of the mountain. So far, those Yin-Yang Void Realm experts all felt extremely shocked. Heartless Island was surrounded by a lake and the lake was surrounded by mountains. The strong killing intent came from the back of a mountain, which was far away from Heartless Island. Even though it came from such a far place, it was shocking. Everybody looked at the direction where the killing intent came from, but what they saw was just the mountains in front of them. At this moment, bang! At the end of the horizon, a huge sword shadow suddenly appeared. Though it was far away from them, they felt shocked. Then the sword shadow split directly towards the mountain. What is he doing? All of them were perplexed. But the next moment, they saw that huge sword shadow splitting the mountain. Rumble. The mountain shook crazily. The next moment, it was cut in two. The mountain was split in half and a 10-meter wide road appeared. At the end of the split tunnel, a figure with a long sword on his back loomed over them. He was Jian Wushuang. With a sword in hand, he was second to none. Chapter 249, Making a Path by Splitting the Mountains and Lakes. Chapter 249, Making a Path by Splitting the Mountains and Lakes. Everybody watched in shock. It was unbelievable that a lofty mountain was split in half by a single sword stroke. Then, numerous people looked towards the far end of the path that was just created, where a figure with a long sword on the back suddenly appeared. Jian Wushuang. With a sword in hand, no one is his match. He is the most peerless genius in the history of our Tianzong dynasty. The entire Heartless Island began to see the all at once. Although some of the participants in the meeting were young warriors, not just mentioning the young warriors, even experts who reached Yin Void or higher were excited. The young warriors were brought here by their elders to gain experience. Seeing Jian Wushuang, they were extremely excited. After all, Jian Wushuang was a real myth to them. Numerous young warriors were full of blind fanaticism and worship for Jian Wushuang. Thinking about it, who else could lead a small dynasty, like the Tianzong dynasty, to defeat all the other northwest dynasties in the easternmost hunt? Who else could achieve the peak of the Yin Void realm before the age of 20? Except, now he had already reached the Yang Void realm. Who else could force Blood Feather Tower, an overlord in the Tianzong dynasty, to set up such an unbelievable trap? No one. He was truly the strongest in the history of the Tianzong dynasty. Jian Wushuang. In the corner of the drill ground, there was a handsome man who was holding his hands tightly. He was extremely excited, and his eyes were full of fanaticism. However, seeing the handsome man in such a state, Jian Menger, who was standing beside him, felt even worse. The gladiator arena gathered a great number of experts, with Bai Chong among them. He looked out towards Jian Wushuang, with his hand touching the left sleeve that was missing an arm. He smiled and muttered, it was worth supporting the birth of such a peerless genius, even at the cost of an arm. Jian Xinhong stood in the field where the solitary experts gathered. He was already looking at Jian Wushuang as well, with an extremely mixed expression that was excited, pleasantly surprised and satisfied, but most of all, worried. Be sure to survive this fight no matter what. Jian Xinhong snarled deep in his heart. Third bro. Wang Yuan and Su Rou were hiding somewhere in the surroundings of Heartless Island. After seeing Jian Wushuang, their eyes began to glisten. Jian Wushuang stole all the spotlight. Everybody present had fixed their eyes on Jian Wushuang, who had appeared at the far end of this path. Jian Wushuang slightly lifted his head as a surging killing intent began to rush out and fill the area. He looked around and took in everything that was happening on Heartless Island. Then, he began moving forward. Dung! As soon as he stepped forward and placed his foot on the ground, an intangible wave instantly rippled out. At the same time, a light sound was heard. However, that sound quickly became louder and louder. Dung! 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 Jian Wushuang walked forward, one step after another, at a fairly slow pace. Every time he took a step, his killing intent grew a little stronger. Jian Wushuang attracted the attention of all the people on Heartless Island. Soon, he passed through the path and made his way to the lakeside. But he didn't stop there. Instead, he directly stepped on the lake without any hesitation. The instant his foot touched the surface, a rumbling sound was heard and the whole lake instantly became turbulent. It looked like the water was being crazily engulfed by its surroundings. Within a minute, only a huge ravine, with no visible bottom, remained where the lake was previously. It was as if the whole lake had been cut away. The ravine was several dozen meters wide, and even though water was surging into the ravine from the lake, it was obvious that this ravine would not be filled in a short amount of time. Seeing this, the experts on Heartless Island couldn't help squinting. At this moment, everybody was reminded of a saying. The mountains will split asunder, the rivers will run dry, and the skies will be stained with blood as swords point towards the demon horde. Among them, the first two already occurred, so the next step should be staining the sky with blood. Jian Wushuang didn't stop after he cut through the lake. He continued walking slowly towards Heartless Island. At this exact moment, dozens of figures violently glided close from the nearby area. Haha, third bro, I am here to help you. Bubbling laughter reverberated throughout the area as a heavily built fat guy appeared at Jian Wushuang's side, followed by more than 20 purple-robed figures that landed behind the fat man in succession. All of them radiated a monstrous aura. Among the purple-robed figures, more than 10 were experts in the Yang Void Realm, while the rest were at the peak of the Yin Void Realm. In the Tianzong dynasty, this battle formation could only be called horrifying. Are they from the alchemy school? Qi Luosheng was standing on a raised platform on the Heartless Island. After watching Wang Yuan and his comrades appear, he slightly squinted his eyes, then he smirked and said, the alchemy school and Holy Emperor Palace restrain each other, so it's impossible for them to bring in their top experts. They are just some ordinary experts in the Yin-Yang Void Realm. What can they do? However, as soon as Qi Luosheng uttered these words, 10 more figures glided close and landed behind Jian Wushuang. Third bro, Su Rou lightly said to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Ice Nether Valley. Seeing this, Qi Luosheng felt a little bit shocked, but it was still not enough to make him feel fear. Jian Wushuang, we are here to support you. A deep roar suddenly reverberated throughout the area, followed by 6 people gliding close to Jian Wushuang. It was a group led by a white-robed lady. After she appeared, the entire Heartless Island began seething. Palace Master White. Palace Master White from Dragon Palace. Palace Master White came in person. Does Dragon Palace intend to get involved? The people present were all top experts from various sects, so one glance was enough for them to recognize Palace Master White. Bai Ling. Qi Luosheng's face instantly darkened and he asked, "Does Dragon Palace want to join this fight?" Haha. Palace Master Black, who had arrived a long time ago, responded to Qi Luosheng with a light smile. Tower Master Qi, you misunderstood. Bai Ling and the 4 previous temple masters of Dragon Palace announced their resignation yesterday. Now they are just Golden Dragon ambassadors of Golden Dragon Palace. They have little relationship with our Dragon Palace. Oh. Qi Luosheng frowned. At this point, many experts had an odd look on their faces. Palace Master White resigned from Dragon Palace? Unbelievable. It seems like everyone is here. The young master of the alchemy school, people from Ice Nether Valley, and Bai Ling from Dragon Palace. Whatever, you guys saved me the time of looking for you later, Qi Luosheng said with a cold look in his eyes. By now, Palace Master White and her comrades had already moved behind Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang. Palace Master White gave Jian Wushuang a deep glance. She was followed by the 4 previous temple masters from Dragon Palace and Jian Wushuang's good friend, Yi Rufeng. Jian Wushuang had not said a word since he appeared. He just stared at the heartless island in front of him and kept walking ahead without a pause on his steps. At the same time, the killing intent continued to surge out of his body, growing stronger and stronger. Jian Wushuang passed through the lake and stepped onto Heartless Island, slowly walking towards the drill ground center. Finally, he appeared in front of Qi Luosheng and the experts of Blood Feather Tower. At this point, Jian Wushuang stopped walking, then lifted his head and slowly scanned the crowd with a cold look in his eyes. When I was chased by Blood Feather Tower and forced to jump into the abyss 3 years ago, I said, the day I return is the day all you demons die. And today is the day Blood Feather Tower is destroyed. Chapter 250, The Fierce Battle Begins. Chapter 250, The Fierce Battle Begins. His cold words reverberated throughout the sky over the Heartless Island, catching the experts on the Heartless Island by surprise. Today was the day Blood Feather Tower would be destroyed. With such a small group. How dare you say that? It's ridiculous. Qi Luosheng sneered, followed by several whoosh sounds. A large number of figures suddenly glided close and then landed near the center of the island. These figures all wore a black robe and a purple mask. It was a group headed by the left and right messengers from Blood Feather Tower. At a glance, the number was roughly 100. So many people. They are all purple-masked assassins. They are all experts in the Yin-Yang Void Realm. Is this the true strength of Blood Feather Tower? Seeing such a battle formation, the experts from the various sects were all shocked. Anyone in the Yin-Yang Void Realm could definitely be considered a top expert in the Tianzong dynasty. Some top sects of the Tianzong dynasty only had a few of these experts at most. However, at the very beginning of this battle, Blood Feather Tower already dispatched about 100. Even though most of these purple-masked assassins were only at the Yin Void Realm, the number of Yang Void Realm experts was still more than 10. It was a fierce and magnificent battle formation. Wang Yuan glanced at Jian Wushuang and then said, with a serious tone, we can handle these people. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. None of you guys will leave here today, Qi Luosheng said coldly. He slightly lifted his palm and immediately signaled for the battle to begin. The instant he lowered his hand, the purple-masked assassins immediately took action. Go! As soon as Wang Yuan snarled, all the experts from the alchemy school, Ice Nether Valley, and Dragon Palace violently rushed forward as well. At this moment, Wang Yuan stepped forward as well. In only an instant, the two groups had already engaged themselves in battle on the Heartless Island. The battle began in an instant. Rumble. As soon as the experts collided, several horrible roars were instantly heard. Along with those sounds, violent spiritual power was crazily sweeping in every direction, leading Heartless Island toward its own destruction. Run, run. Get out of here right away. Hurry, before you get caught up in it. Hurry, leave Heartless Island. At this moment, the experts from the various sects were rushing to leave the island one after another because none of them wanted to be involved in the battle. They halted once they made it to the island's exterior, but their eyes were still fixated on the battlefield. In terms of quantity, Blood Feather Tower had more experts than Jian Wushuang. But in terms of the strength, Jian Wushuang's side was much stronger. Among the experts of the Alchemy School and Ice Nether Valley, more than 15 were at the Yang Void Realm. The remaining were all at the peak of the Yin Void Realm. As for Dragon Palace, although there were only 6 experts, 3 were in the Yang Void Realm, including Palace Master White, while the rest were at the peak of the Yin Void Realm. In other words, among the experts on Jian Wushuang's side, the weakest ones were at the peak of the Yin Void Realm. However, on the Blood Feather Tower's side, even though they had a great number of experts, most were somewhere between the initial Yin Void Realm and the profound Yin Void Realm. Their number of experts who achieved the peak of the Yin Void Realm or the Yang Void Realm was less than Jian Wushuang's side. Because of this, the overall strength of both sides was very close, so it was extremely fierce as soon as the battle began. The experts on both sides were furiously fighting, and it was hard to tell which side had the upper hand. Even though the battle was off to a violent start, Jian Wushuang had not moved a single step. Not just him, Qi Luosheng had not moved either. He was just standing there on the raised platform. Jian Wushuang glanced at the battlefield in the front of him, then turned and looked toward his father, Jian Nantian. Currently, Jian Nantian was lying on the ground and drinking wine alone. His eyelids didn't even flicker until he noticed Jian Wushuang looking at him. Then he gave Jian Wushuang a glance as well. They looked at each other, without needing to say any words. A second later, Jian Wushuang finally began to move. He took one step after another, walking directly towards Jian Nantian. However, when he was about to take his third step, he was stopped by a whizzing sound and 3 figures suddenly appeared in front of him. Huh? After looking at the 3 figures that suddenly appeared, Jian Wushuang halted and the expression on his face darkened. The 3 were not assassins from Blood Feather Tower, but he knew one of them. Mo Lingtian. Jian Wushuang coldly stared at the vicious-eyed man, who was carrying a long sword on his back and seemed to be the leader. The law enforcement elder of the Wilderness Sword Sect, Mo Lingtian. Jian Wushuang previously met Mo Lingtian during the easternmost hunt. At that time, Mo Lingtian lent his hand to Blood Feather Tower against him. Without Wang Yuan's support at that time, Jian Wushuang wouldn't have survived Mo Lingtian's attack. Jian Wushuang. Mo Lingtian had a slight sneer on his face as he blocked Jian Wushuang's path. There were 2 people following behind him, one was a man and the other was a lady. Both of them carried a sharp sword on their back. Furthermore, their aura was no weaker than Mo Lingtian's. The peak of the Yang Void Realm. Needless to say, the 2 behind Mo Lingtian were experts at the peak of the Yang Void Realm. So the 3 in front of Jian Wushuang were all at the peak of the Yang Void Realm. Wilderness Sword Sect. They are from the Wilderness Sword Sect. The Wilderness Sword Sect is one of the top 8 sects in the Nanyang continent. Why are they entangling themselves in Blood Feather Tower's matters? It is already very difficult to deal with Blood Feather Tower. Now, unexpectedly, the Wilderness Sword Sect has joined in as well. The experts who were watching the battle from outside of the Heartless Island already recognized Mo Lingtian and his comrades. Everybody started to feel sad for Jian Wushuang. No matter what, the Wilderness Sword Sect was one of the top 8 sects in the Nanyang continent. Jian Wushuang, we meet again, Mo Lingtian said while staring at Jian Wushuang coldly. Yes, Jian Wushuang slightly nodded and said, I said it during the easternmost hunt, there will be ample time for us to meet again. But I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. However, since you are already here, let's put an end to our animosities today. It's time to finish it. But it will be me who finishes you, Mo Lingtian said. In no time his eyes turned cold. Shua. Suddenly, the space in front of Jian Wushuang was cut, after which Mo Lingtian appeared, holding a sharp long sword in his hand. At this moment, his long sword was already slashing out at an amazing speed, like a bolt of lightning. However, Jian Wushuang just stood there as if nothing had happened, not making a single move. Go to hell! Mo Lingtian yelled and grinned, his eyes turning even icier. The long sword directly passed through Jian Wushuang's neck, but there wasn't a single drop of blood. Huh? Mo Lingtian was stunned because he had perceived that his sword did not touch anything. It was a residual shadow. The object that this long sword just passed through was not Jian Wushuang, just his residual shadow. You want to kill me? An extremely cold voice suddenly came from Mo Lingtian's side. What? Mo Lingtian was shocked and looked to the side, where a figure who he didn't expect to see had appeared. What's more, a tremendous killing intent was radiating from this figure and focusing on him. Do you think trash like you can kill me? No sooner had Jian Wushuang spoke, than he threw out a slap. The palm, filled with slaughter origin, directly moved towards Mo Lingtian's face. Chapter 251, The Starlight Sword Array. Chapter 251, The Starlight Sword Array. Too fast. Jian Wushuang moved so fast that it took some time for people to notice that he appeared beside Mo Lingtian. Mo Lingtian, however, did notice, but before he reacted, Jian Wushuang's palm already landed on his face. Puff! With a single move from Jian Wushuang, Mo Lingtian spat a mouthful of blood. He shot back like a shell and violently crashed into the drill ground, which made the area shake so much that cracks appeared. Senior brother Lingtian. Seeing this, the man and the lady that Mo Lingtian brought were shocked to the core. Mo Lingtian struggled to stand up slowly with a disreputable state. His chest was swollen like a bun, blood could be dimly seen in the corner of his mouth, and his whole body was shaking uncontrollably. By then, his eyes were started turning icy. It's just 7 months since we met last time, how could he have increased his strength like this? Mo Lingtian was astounded by Jian Wushuang. Then he looked at the man and the lady next to him and said seriously, this fellow is a little bit odd, let's display the Starlight Sword Array together and then kill him. Starlight Sword Array. The man and the lady were shocked. The Wilderness Sword sect was well known for the sword principle. The sect not only owned a large number of transcendent swordsmanship and sword skills, but also owned some sword formations. The sword formations were extraordinary and gained a good fame in the entire Nanyang continent. Normally these sword formations were used against the powerful enemies. However, Jian Wushuang was just at the initial completion of Yang Void Realm. Was it necessary for 3 experts of the peak of Yang Void Realm to activate the sword formation by joining hands? Don't underestimate him. Hurry up, Mo Lingtian said without stopping. The man and the lady nodded heavily, and moved into action without hesitation. Whoosh! 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 The 3 figures instantly stood together side by side, followed by the burst of 3 sword essences. In no time the sword essences directly beamed into the sky. Huh! Jian Wushuang held his head up, and looked at the 3 with astonishment. Show him what we are capable of. As soon as Mo Lingtian threw a deep roar, the 3 figures violently glided up at once, and in no time appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. A second later, the 3 slashed their swords simultaneously. Hua! 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 3 streaks of sword light lashed out. Each one was extremely dazzling and held incredible power. The moment the sword light rushed forward, the 3 streaks of sword light merged into one as if they were launched by a single person. The integrated sword light got more and more dazzling, as it was flying towards Jian Wushuang in a much fiercer state. Jian Wushuang was holding an ordinary cyan-colored long sword in his hand. Seeing the sword light getting closer, he moved his wrist and fiercely slashed his long sword out. The 4th move of selfless sword technique. He activated the origin of the world. Thud! The 2 sword lights collided together, leaving an almighty bang behind. Huh! Jian Wushuang was a little bit shocked. He could tell there was a force bypassing his attack and coming in close contact with him. However, he couldn't help taking a few steps backwards. After retreating for dozens of meters, Jian Wushuang regained his balance, held up his head and set his eyes upon Mo Lingtian and his companions at the front. Sword formation. There was a surprised look in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Kill him. Mo Lingtian's eyes were icy. With a snarl, the three displayed their movements simultaneously again. Interesting. Jian Wushuang sneered. He immediately moved up to them. Boom! The horrible sword essence broke out again. Due to the strength of the sword formation, Mo Lingtian and his two comrades seemed to have integrated into one person. They grabbed the sword simultaneously, and by then, both the swordsmanship power and the sword speed got greatly increased. The three were all at the peak of Yang Void Realm, which already afforded them an upper hand. Now joint fight made their battle strength reach an even higher level. However, at this moment, Jian Wushuang activated World Origin and Slaughter Origin simultaneously and engaged himself in the fierce fight. In a short time, it was hard to tell who had the upper hand over the other. Is the sword formation that powerful? Jian Wushuang pondered in surprise. If Mo Lingtian and his two comrades fought with Jian Wushuang individually, all of them would be easily killed by Jian Wushuang. Even if the three allied but did not display the sword formation, Jian Wushuang could handle them calmly and kill them one by one. But now they were displaying the sword formation and seemed like a single person. This greatly enhanced their overall strength. Even though Jian Wushuang already activated the World Origin and Slaughter Origin, he still did not have an upper hand. Jian Wushuang was surprised, while Mo Lingtian and his comrades were shocked. We already displayed the Starlight sword array by allying together. How is it possible we still can't kill him? He is just at the initial Yang Void Realm. Why is his strength comparable to us three? Origin, he comprehended the origin, and he comprehended more than one. What's more, his strength is stronger than the ordinary initial Yang Void Realm. I am afraid his strength is as good as the exceptional Yang Void Realm right now. How is that possible that there is such a powerful expert of the initial Yang Void Realm in this world? Mo Lingtian and his comrades all felt it was inconceivable. After all, they had already used the Starlight sword array. They could even defeat Dan Yi, an expert at the peak of the Yang Void Realm who comprehended the origin. However, they couldn't defeat Jian Wushuang, who was merely at the initial Yang Void Realm. Your sword formation is indeed excellent, Jian Wushuang suddenly said. Mo Lingtian and his comrades looked toward Jian Wushuang at once. But it's over. Jian Wushuang's eyes were icy. He moved his wrist and got his cyan long sword inserted into the interspatial ring. A second later, he slowly pulled out the triple kill sword that he carried in the back. No sooner had he drew the triple kill sword out from its sheath, a scary killing intent spread out. Mo Lingtian and his comrades darkened their faces. Humph, he changed a sword, so what? Mo Lingtian sneered. Don't waste time on him, just use the unique skill. Let's do it. With a monstrous breath, the three figures fiercely glided out again. Go to hell. Mo Lingtian shouted. At that moment, the three all displayed their own unique skill. Instantly, three towering sword shadows could be seen bursting out almost at the same time. The unique skills they displayed were different, but the power activated by these skills were all earth-shaking. The moment the power was activated, the experts standing outside the Heartless Island immediately looked toward them. Even the experts who were fiercely fighting in the Heartless Island right now also threw their eyes over one after another. A second later, the three sword lights, each having immeasurable power, were instantly combined into one. All of a sudden, the sword light became twinkling and dazzling, as if it was a ray of starlight in the dark void. Rumble. The cold sword light pierced through the air, and was tearing everything in heaven and earth. Soon after, it appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked cold. Feeling the chill heavy wind, he instantly slashed his triple kill sword out. Buzzing. The towering sword essence was just activated. Then Jian Wushuang slowly waved the triple kill sword down. He was displaying the fifth move of the selfless sword technique. The fifth move was called blood rupturing movement. Unlike the previous four moves, the blood rupturing movement mostly relied on strength. The majestic sword shadow was immediately activated. This was a very slow slash, as if it didn't contain any strength. However, when it collided with the dazzling sword light that Mo Lingtian and his comrades displayed. Boom! The horrible roar was heard, and it shook the area so much. A second later, the majestic sword shadow just overwhelmingly smashed the sword light to pieces. Then the sword shadow continued to move toward Mo Lingtian and his comrades. Chapter 252, Displayed the Movements. Chapter 252, Displayed the Movements. Boom! The majestic sword essence kept rolling, and made Mo Lingtian and his comrades violently retreat one after another. The Starlight sword array was immediately disintegrated. No sooner had the dignified lady, who was part of the three, regained her balance than a figure appeared beside her like a ghost. What? The dignified lady was stunned. She struggled to turn around and saw a cold sword light flash before her eyes. The light got closer and closer, and left the lady no time to resist it. Chi! The sword light ruthlessly passed over the dignified lady. She was killed by Jian Wushuang without having a second to emit a scream. Jian Wushuang didn't stop his advance. He bounded up again and appeared next to the black-haired middle-aged man. Seeing this, the black-haired middle-aged man suddenly shrunk his eyes. He saw how the dignified lady got killed by Jian Wushuang a while ago. The lady was no weaker in terms of strength. Buzzing. There came another beautiful and mournful sword light. The black-haired middle-aged man widened his eyes, and his face was filled with a hint of frenzy. At this point, he slashed his sword out in panic, hoping he could stop the sword light. However, the result was not in his favor. The sword light mercilessly streaked from the black-haired middle-aged man, and his long sword was directly sheared off in the middle. Without a pause, the sword light continued cutting across the man's throat. How could it be possible? The black-haired middle-aged man felt it was unbelievable even at the last minute before he died. How could his blade just be cut into two pieces by Jian Wushuang's sword? Having killed two peak of the Yang Void Realm experts in succession, Jian Wushuang now focused his eyes upon Mo Lingtian. By then, Mo Lingtian was already freaking out. Junior brother Luo and junior sister Yu. Mo Lingtian looked extremely frightened. Only 7 months have passed. How could have this fellow enhance his strength like this in such a short time? Mo Lingtian felt it was incredible. When he noticed Jian Wushuang's eyes upon him, he instantly could feel that he skipped a beat. Run! At this point, Mo Lingtian just turned around and ran away without any hesitation. He was running to where Qi Luosheng was. While running, he shouted. Tower Master Qi, help me, help me. The wicked figure Qi Luosheng had been sitting on the raised platform on the drill ground. He coldly gave Mo Lingtian a glance and said scornfully, what trash the people in the Wilderness Sword sect are. No wonder they are about to lose the position of one of the 8 top sects. He still stood up slowly. As soon as he stood up, an intense sense of power was instantly engulfing the area. Having felt the strong force, the experts who were fiercely fighting on the entire field of the Heartless Island couldn't help but stop and look in awe. Countless eyes were fixed upon Qi Luosheng. You finally decided to get up. Jian Wushuang half closed his eyes, and stared at Qi Luosheng. Qi Luosheng was the tower master of the Blood Feather Tower. His rank was that of a divine transcendence. The fight had been going on for quite a long time. However, Qi Luosheng hadn't displayed any sign of interest. That is until now. Divine transcendence. He was finally about to take action. A top expert of divine transcendence, How powerful can he be? Outside the Heartless Island, a large number of experts from different sects were excitedly staring at Qi Luosheng. In the Tianzong dynasty, the divine transcendence could be called a legend. Everybody knew that such an expert had accumulated incredible strength and skills. However, no one knew the extent of his power. Most of the experts present, including the Yin-Yang Void Realm experts, had never seen a divine transcendence expert display a movement before. But finally, they would have the chance to see it. Divine transcendence. Jian Wushuang's eyes were glistening. By no time, there was a monstrous battle intent rising up. Feeling the battle intent, Qi Luosheng on the raised platform threw a sneer on his face. He then bounded up and appeared 10 meters away in front of Jian Wushuang. Qi Luosheng was just levitating on the void and overlooking Jian Wushuang. You don't feel scared in front of me. Instead, your battle intent is so violent right now. You have a lot of guts. I don't. I just want to see how strong the divine transcendence top expert is. Jian Wushuang stretched out his tongue and licked his lips as if signifying his desire to experience true power. The battle intent was enormous. Haha, do you think you are qualified to see my real strength? Qi Luosheng sneered. Followed by the display of his 3 fingers, 3 finger points. If you can survive from my 3 fingers, then you are qualified to see my real strength. There was a tinge of obvious condescension in Qi Luosheng's words. However, none of the experts present could ignore his arrogance, because he was divine transcendence. Divine transcendence and Yin-Yang Void Realm were completely 2 different concepts. How strong the expert in such level would be? 3 fingers. Jian Wushuang sneered. Then I will wait and see. I won't let you down. Qi Luosheng lightly smiled. A second later, he lifted his fingers. Watch it, this is the first finger. No sooner had Qi Luosheng uttered the words than he stretched out one of his right fingers. It was a simple and casual pointing. However, as soon as he pointed his finger out, a horrible breath pervaded in the air at once. The void in front of Jian Wushuang was suddenly cut through, followed by the appearance of a giant finger. The huge finger was composed of the vast spiritual power. It sent forth an odd and violent breath, as if it extended from the ancient time. The moment the giant finger appeared, the experts on the Heartless Island were all shocked, horrified, and intrigued. The giant finger contained horrible power, and everybody felt frightened and trembling. At this moment, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but shrink his eyes. A second later, he fiercely slashed his triple-kill sword out without hesitation. The 5th move of the selfless sword technique, blood-rupturing movement. World origin was completely activated. The majestic sword shadow that Jian Wushuang used to cut through Mo Lingtian's sword formation before burst out again at once, and it instantly collided with the giant finger. By no time, the 2 violent forces were just extruding immense power together. Rumble. The void was shuddering, and the horrible power was splattering. However, suddenly, with a bang sound, the majestic sword shadow directly collapsed. Huh! Jian Wushuang was stunned. The giant finger continued pointing towards him, and he couldn't do anything except lifting his triple-kill sword before his chest. A mighty bang was heard, and then Jian Wushuang's body was just destructively forced back. Jian Wushuang had been pushed back for a few hundred meters away, and he didn't keep stand on his feet until he was in the void over the edge of the Heartless Island. At this moment, his face was already pale. You warded off the first finger, good. But I just activated 30% of my strength on this finger. For the second one, I will activate 60% of my strength. Chapter 253, The Might of the 3 Fingers. Chapter 253, The Might of the 3 Fingers. Every one of the countless experts in the Heartless Island couldn't help but be stunned at Qi Luosheng's words. Merely 30% power. That move just then, which struck fear deep in everyone's hearts, had only consisted of 30% of his strength. 30% power. Jian Wushuang shrunk his eyes. It seemed that the divine transcendence expert was much more frightening than he had imagined. He had used every ounce of his strength implementing his blood-rupturing movement to fend off that move just then. And yet he was still at an enormous disadvantage. With only one finger, Wushuang had used 30% of his strength. If a move with 30% of strength was so powerful, then what about 60%? Alright boy, get ready for the second finger. I'm coming. Wushuang laughed dully. Immediately, he extended a finger of his right hand. Rumble. Once again the void in front of Jian Wushuang was split open. An enormous finger came, which was extruding power that felt as if it came from ancient times. In terms of strength, this was undoubtedly much stronger than the previous one. When it appeared, the power surrounding it seemed to have silenced both heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang concentrated his vision, preparing for the next attack. The next moment, his triple-kill sword suddenly emitted dazzling light. The power of the inferior second-grade magic weapon broke out. The moment he held up the long sword, its power reached its limit. Then he violently thrust downwards. The sixth move of the selfless sword technique. The selfless sword technique attached the most importance to origin of the world and made each other stronger. Before, in the ancestors' land, passing through the rainstorm palace in contemplation, he had come to know the fourth and fifth move of selfless sword technique in succession and was only a small step from the sixth move. In the month after leaving the ancestors' land, at the same time as he massacred the Blood Feather Tower's stronghold, he finally grasped the sixth move. Now, he finally was able to put the sixth move to full use. The sword dazzled with incomparable brilliance. With one slash of the sword, it seemed as if it could cleave any living thing and the heavens themselves. However, despite the awesomeness of this mighty sword, when faced with the oncoming attack of the ancient giant finger as they collided, there was a terrible rumble. In merely a flash this incomparable and brilliant sword was summarily defeated. Bang! As the gigantic blast came forward, Jian Wushuang once more withdrew himself. This time, as he fell back, he spat a mouthful of fresh blood out. Under the attack of the finger with 60% of strength, Jian Wushuang was already seriously injured. Still one finger left. Wushuang's gaze was indifferent as he glanced at Jian Wushuang. With this final finger, I'll use 90% of my strength. You should take it well. As Wushuang's words trailed off, his third finger immediately came out. Boom! The void atop Jian Wushuang suddenly had a large hole split in it. Then a giant finger stretched through that hole and moved toward Jian Wushuang. The power of the finger was much more frightening than the two that had come before. When this finger came forward, countless experts in the arena could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Such a finger was able to kill more than 10 experts at the peak of Yang Void Realm in an instant. Watching this finger, Jian Wushuang was shocked. Merely 60% of strength had caused him to be injured, now 90%. The power of the finger was nearly more than he could bear. No matter what, I need to do my best. Jian Wushuang lifted up his head, and in a split second ferociously burst forward with killing intent. Slaughter origin enveloped his whole body, causing him to look like a peerless Shura that had come from hell. He lifted the triple-kill sword once again. The moment he raised up the long sword, the sword's soul in his sea of consciousness madly trembled. Then a giant spectral image appeared behind his back. This spectral image was more than 100 feet tall, like a giant. His body stood straight and tall, coming into view with an ice-cold stare devoid of any emotion, staring straight at the heavens. This gaze seemed full of disdain for everything in the entire world. He stood behind Jian Wushuang, as if he was an unmatched god of war. This giant raised a huge sword, and slashed downwards as Jian Wushuang did. Blood-emptying technique, the first move, all-smashing stroke. The unmatched sword. Sword of killing. There was an immediate explosion. When it comes to offensive power, Slaughter Origin was stronger than World Origin. This blood-emptying technique was also Jian Wushuang's strongest move at present. Giving all that he had, his slaughter origin exploded with immense power. Even Qi Luosheng couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the stroke. However, he still sneered like before. Your swordsmanship is better than I thought. It's a shame that the difference in strength is so great. In the face of absolute power, it all means nothing. As his voice drifted off, the ancient giant finger that came from atop the void descended and slammed directly into the sword of killing. Boom! The heavens fell and the earth split asunder. A blast wave seemingly capable of destroying everything formed in the spot where the two of them collided with each other, madly spreading out. This blast wave swept out and reached many of the experts on the periphery. The Yin Void and even the Yang Void experts were shocked, and their bodies were involuntarily slammed back. Go to hell, Qi Luosheng said softly with cold eyes. Snap! Jian Wushuang's expression immediately changed as the giant behind him dissipated. The giant finger had pulverized his swordsmanship, and afterwards the merciless attacks on his body continued downwards. Finally, it violently hit the ground of the Heartless Island. Boom! The entire Heartless Island swayed, which had never happened before. After everything had settled, everyone couldn't help but look at the direct center of the Heartless Island. There appeared a giant circular pit more than dozens of meters in diameter. It was so deep that you could not see the bottom. Jian Wushuang fell into the lowest part of that pit. No one knew whether he was alive or dead. How terrible! This is the strength of a divine transcendence expert. No, he still hasn't used all of his abilities, just then he only used 90%, but the results. For all of the countless experts inside and out of the Heartless Island, this moment shook them to their core. The divine transcendence expert was so powerful and unbelievable. He was strong enough to make people choke in desperation. Is Jian Wushuang dead? The experts of each side were shaken, and they all simultaneously one after the other stared towards the bottom of the pit. Everyone was curious about whether Jian Wushuang could survive such a terrible attack. Brother! Brother! Wang Yuan and Su Rou had a worried look. At the same time, Jian Nantian, who had been lying on the drill ground and casually drinking, narrowed his eyes as he looked towards the pit. Qi Luosheng stood above the pit and coldly looked downward. Such a little expert of the initial Yang Void realm could make me use 90% of my strength. Even though you're dead, you should be proud. Qi Luosheng laughed coldly, but suddenly his laughter was cut off. Chapter 254. Chapter 254, Devourment of Heaven and Earth, Soul-Devouring Secret Skill. Jian Wushuang was lying at the bottom of the giant pit. There were remnants of blood in his mouth. His face was deathly white. He felt a sharp pain throughout his entire body. The divine transcendence expert was quite powerful indeed. Fortunately, the heavenly creation skill has continuously remolded my body. It made all of the bones and muscles in my body much tougher and durable than the average warrior. Otherwise, the third finger would have finished me off, Jian Wushuang muttered. The power of the three fingers was earth-shattering. Under the attack of the three fingers, he was seriously injured. Can only rely on the final trump card, Jian Wushuang said with a twinkle of madness in his eyes. His most powerful trump card was Soul-Devouring Secret Skill. Soul-Devouring Secret Skill had saved his life from crises many times before. Now, the Soul-Devouring Secret Skill had become his final hope. Secret Skill, Soul-Devouring. Jian Wushuang shouted. Then within his body there exploded out a violent and terrible power. The first volume of the Soul-Devouring Secret Skill absorbed all natural power within a 100-meter radius, and was extremely potent. However, the second volume of the Soul-Devouring Secret Skill was even more frightening. As the Soul-Devouring Secret Skill was performed, there was a rumble and the heavens and earth changed color. Under the gaze of the countless experts inside and out of the Heartless Island, an unprecedented terrific power exploded out from the bottom of the pit. Devourment of Heaven and Earth. In an instant, a giant engulfing whirlpool formed at the bottom of the giant pit. At this moment, a vast amount of natural power coming from all things of the universe headed towards that engulfing whirlpool. What's this? What is that? A whirlpool? Such frightening power to engulf everything. The countless experts on the edges were shaken as they watched this giant whirlpool appear. Everyone felt as if their hearts were going to leap out from their chests. Even when Qi Luosheng saw a giant swallowing whirlpool appear at the bottom, his face fell. Using your final trump card, eh? He knew Jian Wushuang was the type to have an ace up his sleeve, and was able to make his power rise sharply in a short span of time. However, this kind of trump card was not Qi Luosheng's concern at all. You can only go up one level in regards to your own realm. Even if you can go from the initial Yang Void Realm to profound Yang Void Realm, then what? Qi Luosheng said with disdain. Jian Wushuang ever used this trump card before when he was in the easternmost hunting. He then elevated himself from the exceptional Gold Core Realm to initial Yin Void Realm, but he had only gone up one level. In Qi Luosheng's mind, by using this trump card Jian Wushuang could at best just go from the initial Yang Void Realm to profound Yang Void Realm. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang just grasped the first volume of the soul-devouring secret skill when he was in the easternmost hunting. Now, he had grasped the second volume. Look around. Look at those trees, what's wrong? A voice cried in alarm. Everyone then saw that in the Heartless Island, a great number of flowers, plants, and trees all dried up one after the other. Just in an instant, all of them had been deprived of their life force. The ground of the Heartless Island was affected. The earth that had originally been full of vitality had become dry and yellow in an instant, to the point where cracks have started appearing as if a long drought befell the island. The Heartless Island that had previously been abundant with life had seemingly become a place of death in an instant. How big was the entire Heartless Island? No less than a considerable amount of miles. Could any skill really kill off an entire island of this size so quickly and efficiently? Everyone saw this act and it was nearly enough to make their heads explode in a fit of terror. Once the entire Heartless Island's natural power had been swallowed up, the force of the giant swirling whirlpool at the bottom of the pit stood stagnated and then dissipated. Jian Wushuang, who had originally been lying down, slowly stood up. As he stood up, a frightening aura exploded out from his body. With the help of the first volume of the soul-devouring secret skill, he could merely swallow up all of the natural power within a radius of 100 meters. However, after performing the second volume, he devoured all of the natural power on the entire island without exception. His cultivation of spiritual power rose sharply in an instant. He had achieved the peak of the Yang Void Realm. Peak of Yang Void Realm. Jian Wushuang glanced at his palms and then clasped them together. A blast of cracking sounds came out as if he scratched the air. Going directly from the initial Yang Void Realm to the peak of the Yang Void Realm, he had advanced by no less than 3 levels, and this was all within the Yang Void Realm. In the Nanyang continent, there were some extremely powerful elixirs that could sharply increase one's power in a short span of time. With regards to Yang Void experts, there are limitations, they could improve 1 level at most. However, the soul-devouring secret skill had allowed Jian Wushuang to advance by 3 levels. How powerful! Of course, this potent secret technique placed also a heavy burden on the body. The natural power is too much. The longer I utilize the soul-devouring secret skill, the greater effect it has on my body. Jian Wushuang frowned and suddenly raised his head. Boom! With a terrifying aura, Jian Wushuang leapt out from the bottom of the pit, and once more appeared in front of Qi Luosheng. Immediately, his terrifying aura swept out and caused many of the experts around the perimeter to feel it. Such a strong aura! How could his cultivation of spiritual power improve to such an extent? All of that just then, that was all his doing. What on earth kind of method is this? A terrifying method. Numerous of the surrounding experts were all dumbstruck. As he watched Jian Wushuang's aura, Qi Luosheng was also astonished. peak of the Yang Void Realm. But he still smiled just as before. Even with the cultivation of spiritual power advancement, then what? In the end it's still only the Yang Void Realm. In the face of the Saint Realm, he's a mere ant and that's all. For this next move, I'll use full power. When Qi Luosheng finished speaking, a finger of his right hand once again slowly raised up. It just so happens that I also don't want to waste time, Jian Wushuang said coldly. The triple kill sword in his hand trembled with excitement. Behind him, the towering figure of the giant had once again emerged. It was still the first move of the blood-emptying technique, but in the wake of Jian Wushuang's sharp rise in cultivation of spiritual power, the power of the stroke had advanced to a truly terrifying state. The unmatched stroke once again descended. Qi Luosheng's finger extended and the giant finger lashed out once again. In a split second, the two terrifying powers collided with each other. It was as if two stars were colliding head-on. Slam! There was a world-shaking tremor. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. Swoosh! The awful blast waves viciously swept out. The entire Heartless Island started to violently shake. At the core of the collision, a streak of sword light flew off without warning. It mercilessly swept across the Heartless Island. Rumble! In an instant, the Heartless Island split in two. Chapter 255, Half a Palm. Chapter 255, Half a Palm. What? Get out of this island as soon as possible. Oh, my God, the Heartless Island was split in two. Countless experts were petrified at the sight of it. Indeed, the vast Heartless Island was split in two at the moment. If it was due to Jian Wushuang's or Qi Luosheng's attack on the Heartless Island, the onlookers would not be surprised for that to be the case. However, it was just because of the aftermath of the two of them colliding with each other. The wave could affect the island thousands of meters away. What did it mean? All of them were shocked. Many experts, who were having a fierce fight, retreated from the Heartless Island and left the battlefield for Jian Wushuang and Qi Luosheng. In the void over the island, two roaring powers were still up against each other. Their explosive power spread madly, which formed a great energy storm around them within a 100-meter radius. No one dared to intrude into this storm. Even an expert of Yang Void Realm might disappear once he entered it. In the center of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang looked cold, with continuous sword essence bursting out. Qi Luosheng's face fell slightly. He did not expect that his full attack would have been blocked by Jian Wushuang. Although Jian Wushuang improved his strength greatly, he remained at the peak of Yang Void Realm. There was a huge gap between his level and divine transcendence. However, Qi Luosheng did not know that Jian Wushuang had cultivated heavenly creation skill. It made him 10 times stronger than that of cultivation of spiritual power at the peak of Yang Void Realm. More importantly, Jian Wushuang comprehended origin more deeply than Qi Luosheng. Jian Wushuang's triple-kill sword was the inferior second-grade magic weapon and the sword skill he displayed was superior third-grade. As for weapon and unique skill, Qi Luosheng was much weaker than Jian Wushuang. Qi Luosheng. Jian Wushuang suddenly spoke and looked towards Qi Luosheng with cold eye. Qi Luosheng slightly raised his head. Do you know I just struck the blow with 70% of my strength, Jian Wushuang said. What? Qi Luosheng was shocked. He had already tried his best to attack him, but Jian Wushuang just used 70% of his strength? How could it be possible? It said that pay back in one's own coin. Now I will pay you back, Jian Wushuang said coldly, therefore, I'll let you know my full strength. Jian Wushuang instantly burst out his full strength. Thump. The sword shadow, who had been collided with the ancient giant finger, suddenly had immense roaring power. The two forces had been in stalemate, but now as the power of sword shadow increased greatly, the ancient giant finger immediately showed a sign of being in a huge disadvantage. Chi! 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 A hole was pierced in the center of the ancient giant finger, which was made of spiritual power. Then the giant finger lost its defense and was shattered in the blink of an eye. After the giant finger was crushed, the powerful force swept over. Qi Luosheng could not help but step back. When a figure suddenly appeared beside him, Qi Luosheng immediately felt a strong killing intent attack his body. This is bad. Qi Luosheng was scared, with a sense of crisis starting to emerge in his heart. Whoosh! A flash of sword shadow rushed towards him. After the sword shadow came out, the long sword was still shaking madly, letting out the echo of sword, as if it was extremely hungry. Humph! After all, Qi Luosheng was the super expert of divine transcendence. Despite being faced with a crisis, he was still composed. A large quantity of spiritual power gathered in his left hand, and formed armor-like black crystals. Then he used it against the splendid sword shadow. Ridiculous! Jian Wushuang mocked. With the outburst of his strength, Triple Kill's sword emitted a cold light, slashing at the layer of the black crystals on Qi Luosheng's palm. When touching the crystals, the sword light just stopped for a second, and then cut through the layer of the black crystals, as if it was cutting a piece of tofu. It even hurt Qi Luosheng's palm. Qi! 5 fingers flying out at the same time. The sword. Qi Luosheng glanced at the long sword with a flicker of terror in his eyes. Then he retreated as far as possible. After stabilizing his stance, Qi Luosheng held his severed palm tightly. Crack! His blood-red wicked mask, which had been broken during the fight, cracked at this moment. An extremely old, ugly face showed up. His face was completely distorted. A large number of warriors out of the Heartless Island were immediately exhilarated. They were shocked at Jian Wushuang's strength. Jian Wushuang cut off a palm of a super expert of divine transcendence. They were also shocked at Qi Luosheng's face. It was unexpected that an old ugly woman was the Tower Master of Blood Feather Tower. Unexpectedly, the legendary Tower Master of Blood Feather Tower is an old woman. Jian Wushuang held Triple Kill sword, with the soaring sword essence. At this moment, he had appeared beside Jian Nantian. The magic weapon. Jian Wushuang, you are just at the Yang Void Realm. How can you own such a weapon? From the power of the weapon, it might not be a usual third-grade magic weapon. Qi Luosheng slight raised her head with her distorted look. She looked at Triple Kill's sword with a flicker of fear and fever in her eyes. The magic weapons were definitely treasures in the Nanyang continent. Expert for Jian Wushuang, no one in the Tianzong dynasty had magic weapons. She had noticed that the long sword was extraordinary, but she did not expect that the sword was a magic weapon. With the help of this weapon, Jian Wushuang had just cut off her palm. However, you are too naive if you thought you would be able to leave this island alive. Qi Luosheng suddenly laughed hideously. Huh? Jian Wushuang squinted, with an ominous presentiment. Master Shao Nan, it's your turn. Qi Luosheng spoke in a low voice. The moment Qi Luosheng finished her words, a terrifying power suddenly swept over from a corner of the Heartless Island. The power was much stronger than that from Qi Luosheng, who attacked with her full strength. In the blink of an eye, the whole Heartless Island went still. All people present were terrified. No one expected that another divine transcendence was on the Heartless Island. The man was even stronger than Qi Luosheng. Chapter 256, A Fight with Two Experts of the Saint Realm. Chapter 256, A Fight with Two Experts of the Saint Realm. Whoosh! A white-robed elder with white hair suddenly appeared beside Qi Luosheng. His breath was even stronger than Qi Luosheng. Everyone knew his identity. Divine Transcendence. There's still one more person. Jian Wushuang looked at the white-robed elder with an upset look. If the newcomer had only reached the peak of Yang Void Realm and even comprehended origin, Jian Wushuang would not have minded it. However, this elder was a super expert of divine transcendence. Even Qi Luosheng called him master, which indicated the elder's strength. He is Lin Xiaonan of Holy Emperor Palace. Wang Yuan's face fell when he saw the elder. This old monster. Dan Yi was also shocked. Qi Luosheng reached divine transcendence half a year ago, so he had just achieved the saint realm at the most ordinary level. Both Wang Yuan and Dan Yi knew that the white-robed elder had been at the level of saint realm for dozens of years. The old guy has created a saintly body. He is much stronger than Qi Luosheng. Bastard! Wang Yuan cursed in private. The number of experts of Elixir School was comparable to that of Holy Emperor Palace. Wang Yuan had joined this fight out of his own volition. He could not represent Elixir School, so he could not use the experts of Elixir School, but Holy Emperor Palace could. Blood Feather Tower was the underling of Holy Emperor Palace. In order to kill Jian Wushuang and Jian Nantian, Holy Emperor Palace had intentionally dispatched a superior of the Saint Realm to hide himself as a backup, in case events that unfolded were not in their favor. Now, the expert of the Saint Realm showed himself. Master Xiaonan. Qi Luosheng looked at the elder with respect. Tower Master, even though your breakthrough was recent, you're still supposed to be a super expert of the Saint Realm. Unexpectedly, you couldn't even defeat an insignificant person of the Yang Void Realm, and lost half of your hand. If this news spreads, you'll lose face. Lin Xiaonan glanced at Qi Luosheng. The thunderous look on Qi Luosheng's face immediately went stiff and became more distorted. Master Xiaonan, less nonsense, please kill the boy as soon as possible. I know. Since I have come here, I won't let him go. Lin Xiaonan looked confident and stroked his beard. Jian Wushuang was a little scared. Then he waved his hand and released a streak of flowing light towards Jian Nantian. Jian Nantian caught the streak of flowing light and opened his hand. There was a brown elixir on his palm. Father, this is Reversal Red Scorching Elixir, which can fix your broken dantian and enhance your strength. However, the elixir will squeeze out all of your potentials. If you eat it, you will not be able to reach the further realms. Jian Wushuang explained the effect of the elixir. Oh. Jian Nantian blinked, and ate the Reversal Red Scorching Elixir without hesitation. Then he instantly sat down with his legs crossed. Give me 10 minutes, Jian Nantian said, and closed his eyes. 10 minutes? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. 10 minutes was not long, but many fights could take place within 10 minutes. Fourth younger sister. Jian Wushuang shouted. Whoosh! Su Rou immediately appeared beside Jian Wushuang. Please protect my father. Don't let anyone disturb him, Jian Wushuang said. Okay. Su Rou nodded heavily. She was not adept at frontal attack, but as a protector, she was stronger than all other experts. Jian Wushuang was relieved that Su Rou could protect his father, provided that the two experts of the Saint Realm did not attack her. Let me deal with the two guys of the Saint Realm, Jian Wushuang said calmly. Third elder brother, are you sure that you can handle it? Su Rou looked at Jian Wushuang. I'll try. Jian Wushuang smiled, with a flicker of madness in his eyes. Boom! Emitting a terrifying wave of breath, Jian Wushuang dashed out with strong vigor. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang struck a blow with his sword. The sword light whistled. Qi Luosheng and Lin Xiaonan dodged and let the sword light slash through the space between the two of them. Thump! The half part of the island was cut in two by the streak of sword light. Whoosh! An old figure soundlessly appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. It was Lin Xiaonan. He glanced at Jian Wushuang indifferently. Shaping his hand into a claw, he struck back at a lightning speed. Jian Wushuang twisted his body. A streak of white sword light flashed through swirling snow. Lin Xiaonan sneered. Then he clenched his fist and smashed it toward the white light. Clang! Jian Wushuang's sword light collided with the fist, letting out a metal-like bumping sound. What? Jian Wushuang was astonished. I made a powerful attack. Moreover, it came from triple kill sword. It was able to cut off Qi Luosheng's hand. A layer of the black crystals could not block my stroke. However, his stroke could not slash into Lin Xiaonan's fist. It's a good sword, but it's wasted on you. You haven't displayed the real power of the sword. Lin Xiaonan sneered. Then he tried to attack Jian Wushuang with a succession of punches. Each punch was extremely powerful. Jian Wushuang waved his long sword to deflect them. While Jian Wushuang and Lin Xiaonan were fighting with each other, Qi Luosheng took the chance to appear beside Jian Wushuang. Kiddo, go to hell. Qi Luosheng's distorted face became more horrible. He gathered terrifying power in his remaining hand and launched an attack on Jian Wushuang. Ridiculous. Jian Wushuang did not look at Qi Luosheng, and brandished his sword towards Qi Luosheng. The latter was instantly forced to retreat. At this moment, a giant elephant appeared behind Lin Xiaonan. The giant elephant was as large as a mountain. Then Lin Xiaonan's body changed into a mountain, and rushed towards Jian Wushuang. Hum. Jian Wushuang snorted. His body turned into ghosts. Streaks of residual shadow appeared around the void nearby. When Lin Xiaonan eventually crashed into a streak of residual shadow, the sword light immediately dashed towards him. Jian Wushuang made this stroke with roaring battle intent and invincible momentum. He was fighting two experts of the Saint Realm, but there was no sign that he would lose the fight. Chapter 257, 10 minutes. Chapter 257, 10 minutes. Snow continued to fall. The unprecedented battle continued on the Heartless Island. There were only 3 people left, Jian Wushuang, Lin Xiaonan, and Qi Luosheng. Wang Yuan and other experts of Blood Feather Tower had stopped stepping in and stood outside the island to watch this unprecedented battle. The entire Heartless Island was filled with jubilation, when all the spectators saw Jian Wushuang fighting against the 2 super experts of the Saint Realm. Oh God, he's fighting against 2. He's fighting with the 2 super experts of divine transcendence and remains neck and neck with them. How is this possible? How could Jian Wushuang be so strong? Jian Wushuang lives up to his name, he is peerless. He is 20, right? As a 20-year-old man, he could cut off the hand of an expert of the Saint Realm, and could fight against 2 experts of the Saint Realm. It's incredible. Monster, a real monster. Such a monster has never appeared since our Tianzong dynasty was established. Countless experts marveled at it. The younger generation of warriors were in a complete frenzy. Jian Wushuang, amazing. Ling Feng from the Tianyuan sword sect was howling, his hands grasped together. His mania and worship for Jian Wushuang had reached a new peak. Incredible. I've lived for so long and have never seen a peerless genius like him. Our Tianyuan sword sect is famous for sword principle. If our sect could have a genius at just half of Jian Wushuang's strength, I can die without any regrets, a white-haired elder with a young face, who was sect master from the Tianyuan sword sect, said. Jian Meng'er was petrified by those words. After all, Jian Wushuang had numerous ties to her. She had already been shocked by the achievement Jian Wushuang had obtained. Now she felt completely desperate. She was well aware that Jian Wushuang was now so strong that he could single-handedly exterminate her Tianyuan sword sect. Above the void not far from the Heartless Island, a grey-robed elder stood quietly and stared at the unprecedented battle. He's only 20 years old and can already fight against the super experts by himself. Even though he used some special tactics, it's miraculous. Our young master's brother is great indeed. The grey-robed elder was the 6th elder from alchemy school. Even he was greatly shocked by Jian Wushuang's strength. There were 2 figures standing above another void. One was Di Shi, monarch of the Tianzong dynasty, the other was a red-robed man. The red-robed man looked younger than Di Shi, but Di Shi stood behind the red-robed man, showing a hint of respect for the red-robed man. After all, The red-robed man was the real pillar of the Tianzong dynasty. He was the founding emperor of the Tianzong dynasty and the creator of formless swordsmanship, which meant that he had been a super expert of divine transcendence for hundreds of years. The red-robed man was named Hong Shuzi. An amazing kid. Hong Shuzi could not help exclaiming while watching what happened in the battlefield. Your Majesty, should we really be just watching like this? Shi could not help but ask. What else can we do? Hong Shuzi replied with a hint of resignation, I want to save him, but once I step in, I will be in trouble with Holy Emperor Palace. Our Tianzong dynasty is just a small empire in the Nanyang continent and doesn't have a backer. How can we piss off the Holy Emperor Palace? On hearing this, Shi's expression changed. Indeed, the Tianzong dynasty was not a super force like the Alchemy School or Ice Nether Valley. If they offended Holy Emperor Palace could easily wipe them out. Alas, our Tianzong dynasty finally has such a genius. Unfortunately, he has pissed off the Holy Emperor Palace. I'm afraid it will be his last fight. Hong Shuzi shook his head. The last fight? Your Majesty, hasn't Jian Wushuang been neck and neck with them? Shi asked, voice filled with doubt. Yes, he has, but it won't stay that way for long. Hong Shuzi still shook his head. I know the kid has improved his strength greatly because of a special tactic. It should be a cultivation method or a special martial arts technique, which can absorb natural power to serve himself. It breaks the natural balance, so it will cause severe damage to his body. He won't be able to sustain this for long. Moreover, Lin Xiaonan hasn't yet used his full strength, Hong Shuzi said. What? Shi was startled and said, Lin Xiaonan has hidden his strength? Sure. Hong Shuzi nodded, it won't be so easy to fight an expert of the Saint Realm. Qi Luosheng has just reached the Saint Realm, so the kid could cut off his hand. However, Lin Xiaonan has reached the Saint Realm for dozens of years and even created the saintly body. He is much stronger than Qi Luosheng. Look, he's using his full strength. Shi immediately looked toward the battlefield. Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was perfect with the help of Origin of the World. He could block the joint attack from Lin Xiaonan and Qi Luosheng. He did not seem to be weaker than them. However, Lin Xiaonan's strength abruptly burst out. Lin Xiaonan appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Then he changed himself into a peerless beast. Each part of his body, such as his hands, fingers, fingertips, elbows, shoulders, and knees, was transformed into a weapon. Boom! 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 The continuous powerful attack lashed out at an amazing speed. Astonished, Jian Wushuang immediately used his swordsmanship to block the attacks. Each of his strokes crashed into Lin Xiaonan's body parts, but they could not split his body. Lin Xiaonan suddenly opened his mouth and let out a low howl. In the blink of an eye, a blast of sound waves rushed towards Jian Wushuang. The sudden onslaught of the sound waves seriously injured Jian Wushuang. Blood spurted from his mouth. Like a cannonball being fired, his body was thrown backward. He fell heavily, causing the ground on the Heartless Island to be crushed. Jian Wushuang's aura immediately faded away. Alas! He is defeated. Even if he's peerless, he ultimately lost. The countless experts could not help but sigh on witnessing this scene. Jian Wushuang, who seemed to have lost his battle strength, did not look panic-stricken. He had a meaningful smile on his face, because 10 minutes had passed. Chapter 258, A Sword to the South. Chapter 258, A Sword to the South. Is he smiling? How can he smile at this point? Is he crazy? Numerous experts outside the Heartless Island were staring at the smile on the face of Jian Wushuang, who was now lying on the ground. The next moment, a monstrous aura could be seen slowly rising up, as if it was a huge dragon that had slept for billions of years but now had just awakened. In no time the aura flew to the 9th heaven. This is. Many experts outside the Heartless Island couldn't help looking towards the root source of that aura. Lin Xiaonan and Qi Luosheng looked towards it as well. At this moment, the white-haired man slowly opened his eyes. He had been sitting with crossed legs on the drill ground of the Heartless Island. By then, there was a violent aura rising up from the white-haired man. The aura was much stronger than that of the ordinary expert at the peak of the Yang Void Realm. But compared to the experts of divine transcendence, it was a little bit weaker. It seemed a level between the Saint Realm and the Yin-Yang Void Realm. Half-step Saint Realm? Noticing the aura, Lin Xiaonan couldn't help changing his expression. Many experts outside the Heartless Island were all stunned at this moment. Jian Nantian. It's him. Is it him? Unbelievable. His Dantian was destroyed, wasn't it? The warriors were all shocked. They had already seen Jian Nantian when the meeting began. At that time, his Dantian was destroyed and he looked like an ordinary person. He looked extremely dirty. At their first glance, he was no better than a beggar on the street. However, it was just such a person who activated a terrifying aura that was more violent than the experts present. Only Lin Xiaonan and Qi Luosheng were qualified to be his match. Were they really the same person? Before everybody's eyes, Jian Nantian slowly stood up. He looked towards his hands with wandering eyes, and then tightly grasped his fists. Instantly, a horrible strength was gathered in his hands. Reversal Red Scorching Elixir, you want to squeeze my full potential strength? What a joke. Jian Nantian chuckled to himself. The chuckles contained a tinge of a casual air and more overbearing arrogance. When Jian Wushuang gave the Reversal Red Scorching Elixir to Jian Nantian, he already told him that the elixir would greatly squeeze his potential strength to enhance his strength. However, Jian Nantian took the elixir down without any hesitation. The reason was that he was extremely confident in his potential. The truth was that the Reversal Red Scorching Elixir did recondition his Dantian, and his potential strength had been squeezed. However, only a small amount was squeezed before it stopped. Jian Nantian's potential strength was too strong, so even the Reversal Red Scorching Elixir had no way and no ability to get it completely released. After a part of his potential strength was unleashed, his cultivation of spiritual power was greatly enhanced and it reached the half-step Saint Realm level. The half-step Saint Realm is powerful enough to end everything in front of me. Jian Nantian smiled lightly. He then came up to Jian Wushuang. By now, Su Rou already helped Jian Wushuang up. Jian Nantian and Jian Wushuang looked at each other. Both of them showed a smile on their faces, without an exchange of words. Shuanger, borrow me your triple kill sword, said Jian Nantian. With a wave, Jian Wushuang just threw his triple kill sword to Jian Nantian. As soon as Jian Nantian took the triple kill sword, his aura was instantly changed. Jian Nantian was originally amiable and ethereal, as if he was standing on the cloud. However, at this moment, there was an extremely horrible killing intent bursting out from his body. He could definitely be called the matchless killing god. His face turned cold and solemn. Then he slowly turned around and looked towards Lin Xiaonan. You've not only reached divine transcendence, but also had a saintly body. While Jian Nantian was muttering, he fiercely bounded up. Whoosh! Jian Nantian appeared less than 1 meter away in front of Lin Xiaonan. He then casually slashed his triple kill sword out. It indeed looked like a random slash. The triple kill sword waved out at a seemingly slow speed. In the eyes of the experts present, it could be called a slow slash. The slash was too slow, as if it didn't contain any strength. Many experts present were confused, because this slash was too ordinary. Even an expert of the Yin-Yang Void Realm could easily ward off his stroke, not to mention his opponent who was an expert of the Saint Realm. Lin Xiaonan frowned as well. He was about to display the movements, but he was stopped by a horrible killing intent engulfing his body all of a sudden. Rumble. Lin Xiaonan felt as if there were 10 million flashes of lightning and thunder roaring over his head, which made him stunned as once. Lin Xiaonan stood motionless in the void, with his eyes appearing empty. At the same time, his whole body became muddle-headed. The sword shadow was gliding towards Lin Xiaonan slowly. However, he was standing still like a fool, and letting the sword shadow strike at him. Lin Xiaonan's body was extremely hard, even Jian Wushuang couldn't prick his skin with his strongest strike. However now, facing the slow sword shadow, his body was soft like bean curd. Shua! The sword shadow relentlessly cut through Lin Xiaonan's body. Then Jian Nantian stopped his sword, and stood still again. Lin Xiaonan didn't regain consciousness until he felt a prick on his body. At the same time, he could obviously feel that his aura was reducing. Lin Xiaonan widened his eyes, which were full of unprecedented panic at that moment. When his aura was about to die, he shouted to Qi Luosheng who was next to him. Space travel spell. Use the space travel spell right away. He was shouting, and his voice gradually became weak. Finally, he crumpled to the ground, under the eyes of numerous experts in shock. Lin Xiaonan had entered the saint realm for dozens of years, and he even had created the saintly body. But he was just killed with a single strike. Crazy. All the onlookers went crazy at this moment. Impossible. Killed a divine transcendence expert with a stroke? How can it be possible? Fake, this must be fake. How can the expert at the saint realm be killed so easily? Is he really the super expert of divine transcendence? Why he was killed by Jian Nantian like a chicken? Everybody widened his eyes. They couldn't believe what they just saw. Nobody had ever seen Jian Nantian display his movements before, except Jian Wushuang, Wang Yuan, Su Rou, and Dan Jiu. It happened when they were at the Nine Emperors sect. At that time, Jian Nantian's Dantian was destroyed. However, he still killed a Yin Void expert with a slash, with an unbelievable strength. Now, Jian Nantian's cultivation of spiritual power had been enhanced to the level of half-saint. Therefore, it was not hard for Jian Nantian to kill the expert of the saint realm with a stroke. Chapter 259, The Blood Feather Tower, Vanished. Chapter 259, The Blood Feather Tower, Vanished. The experts on or outside Heartless Island were shocked speechless. The warriors who looked down on Jian Nantian and thought he was just so-so, and the ones who thought Jian Nantian was no different from the beggars on the street, were now stunned with their mouths opened. An expert of the saint realm was killed by Jian Nantian with an ordinary stroke. It was indeed an ordinary slash. Normally, an expert at the Yin-Yang Void realm could ward off easily. However, when facing the slash, Lin Xiaonan acted like a fool. He didn't move, nor blocked it. He just stood still, letting Jian Nantian kill him. This was most mysterious and let everybody in a state of confusion. Hung Shuzi was levitating on the void nearby. Seeing this, he couldn't help shouting. Domain, domain. Domain? Di Shi who was behind of Hung Shuzi rushed to look towards Jian Nantian. It is indeed the realm. Jian Nantian should have reached great heights in the ability of controlling the domain. That's why he could cause an expert of the saint realm to lose his consciousness. I am afraid this ability is even stronger than mine. There was a hint of shock flashing in Hung Shuzi's eyes. It was known that Hung Shuzi had broken through the saint realm for hundreds of years, so his strength was naturally even more terrifying. He didn't think highly of Lin Xiaonan. But he couldn't kill him with a stroke like how Jian Nantian did. In other words, Jian Nantian's strength might be stronger than his. What an exceptional genius. Both Jian Nantian and his son Jian Wushuang are exceptional geniuses. One is 20 years old, but he was powerful enough to fight the expert of the saint realm. The other one gained half-saint cultivation, and killed Lin Xiaonan who created the saintly body. Tut-tut, Hung Shuzi couldn't help sighing. The experts on and outside the Heartless Island sighed one after another as well. At the same time, most of them threw their compassionate eyes upon Qi Luosheng. Even Lin Xiaonan, who created a saintly body, was killed by Jian Nantian with a stroke. Would Qi Luosheng have a better end? By now, Qi Luosheng was already stunned by what just happened. Jian Nantian's indifferent eyes upon her had already scared the living daylights out of her. At this moment, what Lin Xiaonan said before he died suddenly flashed into her head. Space travel spell, right, I have the space travel spell. Qi Luosheng's eyes were glistening with a slight of hope. She then rushed to take an object out from the interspatial ring with her shaking right hand. That was a travel spell with a light golden color, and with a layer of vast energy covering the surface. Qi Luosheng took out the travel spell and was about to crush it. But she was stopped by the appearance of a sword light. The sword light came to her without premonitions and it just moved over her arm. Ah! A screech came from Qi Luosheng's mouth. A second later, she found her whole right arm was cut off. The travel spell had fallen away together with the severed arm. At this moment, this fell onto a hand, which easily collected the travel spell. Needless to say, the hand was Jian Nantian's. This should be the space travel spell that Lin Xiaonan just mentioned. Jian Nantian looked at the travel spell coldly. I have heard of it before. It is said that this travel spell contains a wormhole. The wormhole will awaken once it is activated, then the experts in the Holy Emperor Palace will immediately come here through the wormhole. Good thinking, but would she have a chance to do it? Seeing the space travel spell was now in Jian Nantian's hand, and her right arm was amputated, Qi Luosheng's face was icy. A second later, Jian Nantian displayed another movement. It was another slow sword slash which seemed to have no strength. It looked extremely ordinary as well. This time, everybody closely watched the sword, hoping to figure out the mystery of the sword. Qi Luosheng fixed her eyes on the sword light that was gliding close to her as well. She struggled to ward it off. However, a horrible killing intent covered her, making her eyes become dull at once. Like Lin Xiaonan a while ago, Qi Luosheng was like a fool and let Jian Nantian's sword light cut through her body. Thus, the Tower Master of Blood Feather Tower, who was well known in the Tianzong dynasty, and a terrifying existence in the whole Tianzong dynasty, died. Just with a single sword slash. Efficient and quick. Seeing this, a great number of experts around couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They still couldn't figure out how Jian Nantian killed these two experts of the Saint Realm. But they knew clearly that the slash Jian Nantian displayed seemed ordinary, but it actually contained horrifying strength. After killing the two experts of the Saint Realm, Jian Nantian turned around and walked to Jian Wushuang. Here you are. Jian Nantian gave the triple kill sword to Jian Wushuang. Father, the triple kill sword. Jian Wushuang frowned. The triple kill sword was originally owned by Jian Nantian before. Later on, he knew he was chased by the Blood Feather Tower and he barely had the chance to get away, so he found a way to send the triple kill sword to the mansion of Sword Marquis. That's why afterwards the sword was owned by Jian Wushuang. You are more its master than I am. Jian Nantian smiled slightly. He then found a seat, sat down, took out his flagon and began to drink on his own. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, without saying too much. He moved his eyes upon the experts remaining in the Blood Feather Tower. The Blood Feather Tower still had some experts left, such as the left and right messengers. At this moment, both the left and right messengers and the purple-masked killers were trembling in the hearts. After all, their tower master, who was their backbone, was killed with a slash. The people in the Blood Feather Tower are an eyesore, just kill them all, Jian Wushuang said coldly. No problem, we will handle it. Wang Yuan grinned. Dan Yi and other comrades next to him also smiled. The master of the Blood Feather Tower was killed, which meant their backbone was lost, so the Blood Feather Tower was not a concern to him at all at this moment. The remaining experts were like loose sand, which was easy for them to handle. The experts present knew that the Blood Feather Tower was defeated and in a terrible state. even the tower master of the Blood Feather Tower was killed. In other words, the Blood Feather Tower was finished. There was a saying that everybody would hit a man who was down. The Blood Feather Tower hadn't built a good reputation in the Tianzong dynasty. They had lots of enemies, and most of them were at the meeting as well. Seeing that the Blood Feather Tower was about to collapse, the enemies joined in Jian Wushuang's side without hesitation. The whole Heartless Island was immediately in chaos again. The experts in the Alchemy School, Ice Nether Valley, and Dragon Palace led the revenge. Then a large number of experts or sects who had hatred for the Blood Feather Tower took action one after another. They surrounded and attacked the Blood Feather Tower. Although the Blood Feather Tower still had some experts, facing such a formation, they couldn't withstand this. Soon after, lots of experts, including left and right messengers, were killed one by one. When the whole battlefield calmed down, Jian Wushuang looked at the bloody field, with a hint of sparkle in his eyes. From today onwards, there will no longer be Blood Feather Tower in this world. Chapter 260, The Exceptional Father and Son. Chapter 260, The Exceptional Father and Son. Over. After killing all the experts in Blood Feather Tower, the war finally came to end. After the end of the war, many experts at the court found that Heartless Island, which originally stood at the center of the lake, had disappeared. It was gone indeed. The main island had sunk into the bottom of the lake except for some fragmented and patchy lands. Outside Heartless Island, a group of experts who attended this gathering had witnessed the war. They were hot-blooded and excited and couldn't calm down for a long time. Everyone here was talking about the brutal war just now. It was not until dusk that the experts of the clans and other forces left gradually. The next day, the Millennium Chronicle from Gladiator Arena described the war. This war was named by the Millennium Chronicle as, a war enough to surpass the ancients and amaze the present. The Millennium Chronicle depicted in detail all the scenes of the war at Heartless Island, including splitting the mountain to make a path and cutting off the lake at the beginning. It also described how Jian Wushuang killed 3 warriors at the peak of the Yang Void Realm from Wilderness Sword Sect, and fought alone against 2 experts of the Saint. The description was very detailed, in which all aspects were described and explained. In addition, the Millennium Chronicle also mentioned that Jian Wushuang was only 20 years old. 20 years old, fighting alone against 2 experts of the Saint Realm? Amazing! Unbelievable, he was only 20 years old, how could he be so strong? Countless warriors of the Tianzong dynasty felt shocked and they saw the description of this page of the Millennium Chronicle. In their heart, experts of divine transcendence were almost like deities, but a 20-year-old little boy fought against 2 experts of the Saint Realm and even cut off half of a palm of one of them. Everyone was naturally amazed by the terrifying talent. At the end of the Millennium Chronicle, Jian Nantian was mentioned again. First, it simply described some experiences of Jian Nantian before he was at Blood Feather Tower, and then mentioned his 2 gorgeous and dazzling strokes on the Heartless Island. The 2 experts of the Saint Realm were killed by the 2 strokes. Seeing this, those warriors of Tianzong dynasty were all excited. More importantly, the Millennium Chronicle said that Jian Nantian himself was not in the Saint Realm. A man who did not reach divine transcendence had killed 2 divine transcendence experts with only 2 strikes. Everyone felt overwhelmed and thought that it was incredible. There was a sentence that evaluated these father and son at the end of the Millennium Chronicle. Both father and son are exceptional geniuses who are as splendid as the heaven and earth. Countless people admired this sentence and all agreed with what it said. It was really outstanding that both father and son were such geniuses in defiance of the natural order. After the Millennium Chronicle updated, the Earthly Dragon List and Heavenly Dragon List from the Golden Dragon Palace had great changes. Jian Wushuang always ranked number 1 on the Earthly Dragon List, but now his name disappeared from the list. The Heavenly Dragon List recorded 18 experts at the peak of the Yang Void Realm from the Tianzong dynasty, and the left and right messengers of Blood Feather Tower were also on the list. After the war, Jian Wushuang and his father rose while the left and right messengers died, so the list naturally changed. The Heavenly Dragon list updated its rankings. The top 1 on the Heavenly Dragon list, Jian Nantian. The top 2, Jian Wushuang. The top 3, Di Shi. No one in the Tianzong dynasty dared to question about the rankings. Even Di Shi, who originally ranked number 1 on the list, had no disagreement about that, because everyone knew that Jian Nantian and Jian Wushuang were qualified for their rankings. Their battle results were recognized by the public and their strength were not in doubt. While the whole Tianzong dynasty was shocked by the earth-shattering war, something happened in the Sword Marquis mansion. After a few years, Jian Wushuang came back to the Sword Marquis mansion again. In the courtyard where Jian Wushuang lived, several purple-robed figures stood there without any emotions and sent forth powerful breaths. Outside the courtyard, many disciples of Sword Marquis mansion excitedly gathered there and stared at these purple-robed people. They are the super experts of the Yin-Yang Void Realm? Yes, all of them are at Yin-Yang Void Realm. Any one of them is much stronger than our mansion master, but now, they are our brother Wushuang's guards. Brother Wushuang is so great. When Jian Wushuang came back the Sword Marquis mansion, the news about the war at Heartless Island was known by the disciples of Sword Marquis mansion. The whole mansion of Sword Marquis was astonished about that and all disciples worshipped Jian Wushuang. The purple-robed people at Yin-Yang Void Realm in front of them were legends for the disciples of Sword Marquis mansion, but now they stood reverently out of the room and apparently only acted as guards. A warrior at Yin-Yang Void Realm worked as a guard, which was unbelievable to the disciples of Sword Marquis mansion. In the room, Jian Wushuang sat on a seat and his face was pale while his father and Wang Yuan sat beside him. Third younger brother, what's wrong with your injury? I gave several excellent pills to cure your injury, but 3 days passed, you still have not recovered, Wang Yuan frowned and said. After hearing that, Jian Wushuang smiled. My injury was caused by some special means. Even though I have your elixirs, it will still take me a dozen days to recover. Jian Wushuang clearly knew that it cost him a lot to perform Volume 2 of Soul Devouring Secret Skill, let alone lasting for a long time. Even when he was heavily hurt by Lin Xiaonan, it was lucky for him to save his life. Jian Nantian moved his gaze and glanced at Jian Wushuang. In the Heartless Island, he saw Jian Wushuang performing soul-devouring secret skill and secretly guessed some taboos because of that, but he didn't say any more. Where is the fourth sister? Jian Wushuang suddenly asked. She's gone, Wang Yuan said. After sending you back the Sword Marquis mansion, she took her people away. Maybe she hurried to Ice Nether Valley. Oh. So urgent? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but be surprised. The fourth sister was not urgent, but the master behind her might already be impatient, Wang Yuan said a little coldly. Master? Jian Wushuang frowned. Wang Yuan, you have never mentioned the master behind the fourth sister. It seems that you're not happy with him, what's the matter? I'm not satisfied with him, because I always think that guy is very hypocritical. I'm afraid that it's not a good thing that the fourth sister stays with him, Wang Yuan said. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help squinting. Chapter 261, I just need 5 years. Chapter 261, I just need 5 years. Besides his father Jian Nantian, Jian Wushuang cared for his brothers most in this world. Jian Wushuang regarded Su Rou as his biological sister. No matter who would harm Su Rou, he would defeat him first. I can see that the little girl you mentioned possesses a special constitution, Jian Nantian also looked over and said indifferently, generally, the more special a constitution, the greater possibility of being used. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's face sunk suddenly, looked to Wang Yuan and said, Wang Yuan, you are the young master of the alchemy school. Could you manage to protect the fourth sister in secret? Although Ice Nether Valley cannot yet be compared with my alchemy school, it also is a large sect in the area. Su Rou stays in the Ice Nether Valley, but the experts of our alchemy school have no chance to enter, how could I protect her? Wang Yuan shook his head. But I will try my best to supervise Yi Chen. Once I find that he mistreats Su Rou, I will instantly take action. It's no big deal to look for an opportunity to kill him. Jian Wushuang couldn't help shrugging. As Su Rou was staying in the Ice Nether Valley now, he was unable to help her and had to depend on Wang Yuan. Dad, what are you going to do next? Jian Wushuang looked at Jian Nantian again. I'm going to do one thing, Jian Nantian said directly. What is it? Asked Jian Wushuang. This thing is related to your mother, said Jian Nantian. Mom? Jian Wushuang felt rather surprised, and merely said, didn't Mom die? His mother, Ji Wumeng, was killed by the experts of Blood Feather Tower many years ago. It's Wu Yue who told you that your mother died, right? Jiang Nantian looked at Jian Wushuang and said. Yes, Jian Wushuang said and seriously nodded. This thing news, including the genocidal killing of Ji clan, was heard from his aunt, Ji Wu Yue. It's understandable. Jian Nantian shook his head and smiled. At that time, Ji clan was implicated due to me and involved in genocidal killing. But Ji Wu Yue was not there, so she didn't witness the disaster, which made her think that all clansmen of Ji clan, including your mother, were killed by the Blood Feather Tower. However, your mother didn't die. What? Jian Wushuang was astonished. His mother was still alive. Mom, Jian Wushuang felt overwhelmed and murmured. He had never seen his mother since he was young. Therefore, he always felt curious about his mother. At that time, when he heard the news from Ji Wu Yue that his mother died, he was upset and indignant. But now Jian Nantian told him that his mother, who he had never seen, was still alive. Wumeng is really alive. Jian Nantian was narrating. Originally, in the massacre, a lot of experts and clansmen of Ji clan were killed. However, only your mother survived and was caught by a young man. A young man? Jian Wushuang was shocked. I will never forget that man. Jian Nantian's indifferent gaze suddenly became a little ruthless. A heavy killing intent appeared around him, which made the whole room become cold. The young man, with a golden robe, looked gentle and cultivated. There was a horrent and bloody red scar between his eyebrows, which might be a sword scar. He is very strong. The original Ji clan was one of the 8 top clans in the Tianzong dynasty and ranked high. Even though the Blood Feather Tower took a long time and paid a high price to destroy Ji clan. But it was this man who killed all the high-ranking members of Ji clan without any effort, leaving only your mother who was taken away by him. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was shocked. Killing many high-ranking members without any effort. Someone with such a strength might be an expert of the Saint Realm at least. Who is he? Jian Wushuang asked. I don't know. Jian Nantian shook his head. His identity was very special. Even the Tower Master of Blood Feather Tower didn't know his true identity. However, I met him again half a year ago. Half a year ago? Jian Wushuang was intrigued by this information. Half a year ago, he stayed in the Ancestors' Land and received the first test of the Ancestors' Land. When I met him at that time, his exposed strength made him unfathomable. I don't know how he took away my sword soul, Jian Nantian said seriously. What is this? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Sword soul. Dad, your sword soul was taken away by him? Jian Wushuang was really shocked. He and his father both awakened sword soul. When in the Ancestors' Land, he knew from Jin Ling that only the real genius of sword principle would be qualified to awaken the sword soul. Jian Wushuang believed that someone would be able to destroy the sword soul, but it was much harder to take it away. It was just like that the cultivation of spiritual power a warrior gained with great efforts was completely stolen and transplanted into another man. Such a method was incredible. The means of that man was really extraordinary, and his strength was even more unfathomable, Jian Nantian said seriously. I'm afraid that I will fail when fighting him, but I must find out his identity and your mother's whereabouts. I don't feel guilty about anything, except for your mother and Ji clan. I will try my best to find your mother. I see. Jian Wushuang wore a serious look. Dad, I will go with you. You? Jian Nantian looked at Jian Wushuang, shook his head and smiled. You are too young and weak to help me. But Dad, Jian Wushuang was anxious. When he opened his mouth, Jian Nantian interrupted him suddenly, and then said with a grin, as long as you withstand 3 strikes from me, you can go with me. Jian Wushuang was shocked. Even Lin Xiaonan, who reached divine transcendence and formed a saintly body, could not withstand a strike from Jian Nantian. It was impossible for Jian Wushuang to survive 3 strikes. Jian Nantian said with a smile, Shuanger, if you really want to help me, cultivate yourself and leave the Tianzong dynasty to go to the vast expanse of the world. Only in this way could the nestling become an eagle, and you have a long way to go. The Holy Emperor Palace, I left it for you. That's your first target. If you could destroy the Holy Emperor Palace within 10 years, you are really qualified to help me. Destroying the Holy Emperor Palace within 10 years? Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold. 10 years is too long. I just need 5 years. Chapter 262, Tang of the East. Chapter 262, Tang of the East. 5 years? Jian Nantian looked at Jian Wushuang. After perceiving the determination in his gaze, he could not help but nod. I'm looking forward to it. On hearing this, Wang Yuan could not help but acclaim. In the whole Nanyang continent, I'm afraid that only Jian Wushuang and his father dare to say that they would trample Holy Emperor Palace underfoot in 5 years. Jian Nantian turned over his hand and took a manual out of his interspatial ring. Here you are. This is. Jian Wushuang took it with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. A top expert kept a record of some tips about the origin. I found it when traveling around. Now it's useless for me, but will be helpful for you, Jian Nantian said. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly and immediately accepted it. Jian Nantian brought a pot of wine and said, Shuanger, let's have a drink. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded and took the wine pot. After drinking a pot of wine, Jian Nantian smiled slightly and said, Shuanger, you need to depend on yourself from now on. I hope you will trample Holy Emperor Palace underfoot in 5 years. I'll wait for you. Then his body flashed, and he left with the wind. Jian Nantian desired freedom. He was destined to rove the world. Jian Wushuang stood still in the room and watched his father disappear with tears in his eyes. I'll catch up with you in 5 years. Jian Wushuang thought secretly, with his hands clenched. After a while, Jian Wushuang and Wang Yuan sat down at the same time. Third younger brother, what are you going to do? Wang Yuan asked. Jian Wushuang's face fell and answered, I originally planned to look for a strong sect to improve my strength, but now I have offended Holy Emperor Palace. I'm afraid few sects will accept me in the Nanyang continent. He spoke the truth. Holy Emperor Palace was known as the overlord of the Nanyang continent, so few sects dared to protect the person that was being hunted by Holy Emperor Palace. Alchemy School was able to protect you, but it's up to my father. I've mentioned you to him, yet he just smiled, without saying a word, Wang Yuan said discontentedly. Jian Wushuang kept silent. Third younger brother, you cannot enter those sects, but I know a place where you can practice. It might be not worse than those sects you want to join, Wang Yuan suddenly said. Where? Jian Wushuang immediately looked toward him. Tang of the East, the first empire in the Nanyang continent, Wang Yuan replied seriously. The first empire? Jian Wushuang asked with a doubt. The Tang dynasty was known as the first empire in the whole Nanyang continent. It covers a vast land, which was over 10 times larger than any other large empires. Moreover, it's full of experts, so it's much stronger than the other old sections. The forces of the Nanyang continent belonged to 1 palace, 1 school, 3 valleys and 4 temples, 8 sects, and thousands of dynasties. In fact, as for the overall strength, the Tang dynasty is definitely superior to the 3 valleys. Even our alchemy school and Holy Emperor Palace hold the Tang dynasty in awe, Wang Yuan said. It's so strong. Jian Wushuang was surprised secretly. The Tang dynasty has another 2 names, the Slaughterous dynasty and the Country of Death. Wang Yuan said in a low voice. He continued, the other empires of the Nanyang continent follow the law of the jungle, but they have a bottom line and set some rules for themselves. In contrast, there are no rules or bottom lines in the Tang dynasty. The strong have all the say. As long as you are strong, no one cares even if you slaughter in the palace of the Tang dynasty. If you're strong enough, you can slaughter thousands of warriors or wipe out cities one by one as you like. No rules or constraints. It's up to your strength. Therefore, it could be compared to Shiraba. The more chaotic a place is, the more appealing it will be for militant warriors. A large number of warriors go to the Tang dynasty every day. Many warriors die there, so it's known as the Country of Death. It's a paradise for killers and hell for the merciful. A glimpse of crazy battle intent flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The Slaughterous dynasty. The Country of Death. It's a paradise for killers and hell for the merciful. There exists an empire like that in the Nanyang continent. It's crazy and horrible in the Tang dynasty. With countless experts, it would be the most suitable place for cultivation. The second younger brother has been brought there by Wine Master, Wang Yuan said. The second younger brother has gone there too. Jian Wushuang raised his brows. In fact, he was already at fever pitch. He was adept at sword principle. Sword principle was used for killing. He also comprehended slaughter source. He was born to be a fighter. The place might be unacceptable for ordinary warriors, but it was a place he was longing for. Without the threat from Holy Emperor Palace, he would desire to go there. Now since he was completely targeted by Holy Emperor Palace and places for his practice were limited, the Tang dynasty would be his best choice. I have decided to go to the Tang dynasty, Jian Wushuang said seriously. Wang Yuan shrugged his shoulders, as he knew Jian Wushuang would go. Third younger brother, if you go to the Tang dynasty, you'll pass by the northern region. I happen to have one thing that needs your help. I believe you won't refuse my request, Wang Yuan said with a smile. Oh. Say it. Jian Wushuang looked toward Wang Yuan. Wang Yuan began to narrate the whole story. You must know the whole setup of the Nanyang continent. Our alchemy school has kept a delicate relationship with Holy Emperor Palace. We've never started a war, but we have an explicit or implicit contest with each other. The Wilderness Sword Sect, one of the top sects. The disciples of the Wilderness Sword Sect have been disappointing these years. The sect has declined, so it will be expelled from the 8 sects, but during this period, it seems that the Wilderness Sword Sect got support from Holy Emperor Palace because of you. Our alchemy school doesn't want to see the Wilderness Sword Sect become the Holy Emperor Palace's affiliate, so we want to remove it using special tactics. We'll take action in a month, so I need your help. Do you want to go against Holy Emperor Palace? You can wipe out the Wilderness Sword Sect first at your convenience. Chapter 263, A Spar. Chapter 263, A Spar. Wilderness Sword Sect. Jian Wushuang smiled. He might hesitate to launch an attack on other sections. But he had a grudge against the Wilderness Sword Sect. During the easternmost hunting, Mo Lingtian wanted to strike him to death. Then in the Heartless Island, the experts of the Wilderness Sword Sect wanted to kill him. Now this sect followed Holy Emperor Palace. Therefore, Jian Wushuang was willing to attack the Wilderness Sword Sect. Well, I'm in. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile. But what can I do? This is a token. Take it and go find the Daluo Heaven sect in the northern region in a month. You need to give the token to the ninth elder Ling Han. Then he'll tell you what to do. Wang Yuan smiled. Daluo Heaven Sect. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Okay. When are you going to leave? Wang Yuan asked. I'll wait until I get better, Jian Wushuang answered. It's okay. You just need to reach there in a month. I'll order someone to give you a map of the Nanyang continent. You might need it, Wang Yuan said with a smile. After staying in Mansion of Sword Marquis for a day, Wang Yuan left for alchemy school with his underlings. Jian Wushuang left the Tianzong dynasty and started his real trip to train after a few days. The young eagles spread their wings to travel into the vast sky. A month later, it was still chilly, while snow covered the ground. The northern region was located in the north of the Nanyang continent and covered a vast land. There were more than 100 dynasties in the northern region. More than 10 of them were large empires. The northern region also had a powerful sect. This was one of the 8 top sects, the Wilderness Sword Sect. In recent years, experts and disciples from the Wilderness Sword Sect had not made any progress, so the strength of the sect had been going backwards, its position hanging by a thread. In the northern region, there was another sect which could fight against the Wilderness Sword Sect. That was the Daluo Heaven Sect. The Daluo Heaven Sect was at the peak of the mountains. Jian Wushuang with a long sword on his back was walking slowly on the road to the Daluo Heaven Sect. Deep footprints were left behind him in the snow. Momentum, lift heavy weights easily and shake heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang was studying the manual his father gave him while walking. The manual provided some tips about the origin written by a top expert. The manual mentioned source enlightenment was divided into 3 levels. The first level referred to momentum. The second level referred to domain. The third level referred to pinnacle. Jian Wushuang started to comprehend world origin and slaughter origin, so he had not reached the first level, momentum, yet. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang stopped walking, with his triple kill sword out of the sheath. Then he began to practice swordsmanship alone in the snowfield. Shua! The sword light was waving slowing, with little strength. Every streak of sword light lashed out and made the snowflakes drift beside him. At this moment, 2 figures were just flying over his head. One of the 2 women looked less than 30 years old. We're going back to the sect. You'd better behave yourself after returning. Although you didn't make a big trouble this time, you've caused our sect some trouble. You'll be punished, but it won't be severe, the white-clothed woman said. I know, senior sister. I'll accept my punishment after returning to our sect. You've said many times along the road, the green-haired maiden, less than 20-year-old, said and stuck out her tongue. Suddenly, she glanced at the ground and happened to see Jian Wushuang who was practicing swordsmanship in the snowfield. Senior sister, look, there's a man who's practicing swordsmanship. The green-haired maiden cried out. The white-clothed woman looked downward and could not help but raise her brows. The man looks very young. His swordsmanship is quite slow. I haven't studied swordsmanship, but I know it's quite ordinary. The green-haired maiden curled her lip. Shut up. The white-robed woman rebuked her. You don't understand. His swordsmanship looks slow, but every stroke is very delicate. I'm afraid that his strength is higher than mine. What? The green-haired maiden asked in surprise. It's not far from our Daluo Heaven sect. This man practices swordsmanship here. Does he want to come to learn kung fu? The white-robed woman could not help but think. She thought the young expert of sword principle must want to join the Daluo Heaven sect. Senior sister, this man's cultivation of sword principle is not weaker than yours? The green-haired maiden looked toward her senior sister. I don't know, but why not have a try? The white-robed woman laughed and then moved downwards. Jian Wushuang was absorbed in practice for a while, and then he stopped. Shake heaven and earth. How does it work? Jian Wushuang withdrew his sword and was still puzzled at it. The moment he raised his head, he just saw two women landing on the ground. They were quite pretty, especially the white-robed woman. She was a great beauty, with black brows, big eyes, red lips, white teeth, and fair skin. Even Jian Wushuang could not help but praise her to the bottom of his heart. Jian Wushuang was more surprised at their cultivation. The green-robed maiden was around 20-year-old and had reached the initial Yin Void realm. The white-robed woman was less than 30-year-old, but Jian Wushuang was not sure about her cultivation, at least the profound Yang Void realm. In the Tianzong dynasty, it was almost impossible to see someone that had such cultivation of spiritual power at her age. I've been a person living at the bottom of a well. Jian Wushuang could not help but sigh. I'm Jun from the Daluo Heaven sect. The white-robed woman stood in front of Jian Wushuang and introduced herself modestly. Jian Wushuang touched his nose and smiled slightly. I'm Swordsman. Swordsman. Jun frowned, but immediately said with a smile, I saw you perform swordsmanship. You must be adept at sword principle, and I've also studied sword principle, so I want to learn some moves from you. Would you like to spar with me? Chapter 264, Throw Him Out. Chapter 264, Throw Him Out. Spar with me, an interested smile showed on Jian Wushuang's face. Jun explained, take it easy, I just want to have a competition with you in martial arts, nothing to do with cultivation of spiritual power. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Sparring when one ventured outside was normal. Besides, the white-robed woman, Jun, standing in front of him was humble. It was hard to refuse her. Okay, please, a cyan long sword showed in her hands. Sir, be careful. After she had said that, wow. In a second her figure turned into a sharp sword, breaking through the void and hurtling at Jian Wushuang. The sword light seemed to penetrate everything. Seeing that, Jian Wushuang couldn't help marveling at Jun Yi's outstanding mastery of sword principle. He moved and brandished his triple-kill sword casually. An ordinary move hit right on the sword edge of Jun Yi's long sword and deflected her attack instantly. Then 3 more moves went towards Jun Yi in succession. It horrified Jun Yi. She brandished her long sword and barely managed to block those attacks, while her body took a few steps backward. His swordsmanship is so fast. Stabilizing herself, Jun Yi looked over at Jian Wushuang, I have to go all out to beat him. As soon as she finished saying this, a mighty sword essence burst from her. It turned into a fog, coming at Jian Wushuang. What's this? Jian Wushuang looked at the gray fog with confusion. The next moment he felt traces of killing intent from it, but he found that he was trapped and couldn't move. Such a strange skill. Jian Wushuang was shocked by this. Jun Yi attacked again, bang. Her body suddenly flew at Jian Wushuang, then her long sword turned into a flowing light rushing towards him at an amazing speed. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes slightly and lifted up his long sword, in which a trace of the origin of the world was contained. Clang! Jun Yi's cyan long sword was knocked off, and her body was also beaten back. Coming to a stop, Jun Yi looked at Jian Wushuang with shocked eyes, though I have used sword realm, I still lose completely. His swordsmanship is so strong. What's the skill of turning sword essence into fog? Suddenly Jian Wushuang asked her. Sword fog. Jun Yi told him, one move of sword realm, which is a sword principle secret in Daluo Heaven sect. Sword realm. Jian Wushuang felt curious. It was so special. Trapped in the fog, he found it hard to move. If he didn't use his origin power, he could not defeat her so easily. You said that you were a disciple of Daluo Heaven sect. I am just about to go there, would you mind leading the way? Jian Wushuang said with a smile. Both Jun Yi and the green-haired maiden behind her smiled. They thought Jian Wushuang was going to Daluo Heaven sect to learn, and it was a good thing, especially after they saw that he was quite good at sword principle. We welcome you, please follow us. Jun Yi said this, then she and the green-haired maiden led Jian Wushuang along. Soon they came to an old sect. Located at the top of a mountain, the old sect was magnificent, much larger and awe-inspiring than those Jian Wushuang had seen before. Led by Jian, Jian Wushuang wasn't stopped by the gatekeepers of Daluo Heaven sect. They came to a hall. "Please wait here for a minute." After saying this, Jian and that green-haired maiden left. A while later, Jian and a black-haired elder came. "Jian, is he the one you told me who is much stronger than you in sword principle?" The black-haired elder looked at Jian Wushuang. "Yes." Jian nodded, then she said to Jian Wushuang, "Swordsman, this is our law-enforcing elder, Elder Qiuing." "Oh, law-enforcing elder?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. He knew there were law-enforcing elder in older sects, such as the law-enforcing elder in Wilderness Sword sect. They were more like senior servants dealing with affairs of the sect, but they were actually not the top executives of the old sections. There was House of Elders in these old sects, and these elders were top powerhouses and the core of an old sect. "Nice to meet you, Elder Qiu," Jian Wushuang said politely. "Make yourself at home." Qiuing waved his hands and sat on a chair in front of him casually. "Jian said that your swordsmanship was good, judging from your age. You came here for a coach, right?" "No," Jian Wushuang shook his head and replied. "No?" Jian was surprised, and Qiuing frowned as well. "What are you coming for?" Qiuing asked. "I was asked by someone to visit Ling Han, the 9th elder of Daluo Heaven sect." "Is he here?" Jian Wushuang said. "The 9th elder?" Qiuing's face changed, looking Jian Wushuang up and down, then sneered, "Young man, is Elder Ling Han someone you can see if you want to? Even it were me, I see him only a few times every year. I was asked to see him, besides, he would have been told that I would come." Jian Wushuang said with a calm voice. "Enough." Qiuing shouted in a deep voice. He sneered, "Young man, how could you boast without shame at such a young age? Elder Ling Han does not know you and apparently, you are here to make trouble. Throw him out." "Elder Qiu." Jian was a little worried. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes slightly. Qiuing was kind before he knew that he didn't come here for a teacher but was looking for Elder Ling Han. 2 disciples outside the gate came in. Seeing that, Jian Wushuang's face turned cold, then he sneered, "I didn't expect that the Daluo Heaven sect would treat a guest like this. I will leave." Jian Wushuang wasn't in the mood to explain. He stopped just before leaving. "By the way, this is the token, proving that I have come and kept my promise, but you didn't believe it." Jian Wushuang threw the token which Wang Yuan gave him to Qiuing, then he left directly. Chapter 265, An Apology. Chapter 265, An Apology. After Jian Wushuang left. "Elder Qiu, Swordsman might really come to visit Elder Ling Han. Isn't it a little overbearing to throw him out without checking?" Jian said in a low voice. "Jian, you think highly of him. He is so young, how could he have a relationship with Elder Ling Han? It must because he heard about Elder Ling Han and came here to acknowledge Elder Ling Han as a master. Many came for that each year." Qiuing didn't take it seriously. "Besides, Elder Ling Han and other Daluo Heaven sect elders are busy in an event. Even it was me, having no chance to see him, let alone him, how is it possible? As for the token." Qiuing glanced at the token Jian Wushuang threw on the ground with disdain. While he looked at the token more carefully, his face changed at once. The token, Qiuing stared at it, is the Grand Elixir token. Qiuing was struck dumb with amazement. No matter Holy Emperor Palace or Alchemy School, they had their own token as a pledge. There was a special mark on it, no one dared to counterfeit it. Holy Emperor token represented Holy Emperor Palace and Grand Elixir token represented the Alchemy School. Could it be the Grand Elixir token? Qiuing was shocked with mouth and eyes opening wide. A moment later, dozens of roars in Daluo Heaven sect rose to the sky. Hurry up, act separately, find him. They were led by a silver-robed and gray-haired elder, who was the 9th elder of Daluo Heaven sect, Ling Han. However, his face was filled with sadness now. You were so overbearing to throw him out without asking clearly. When did the people of Daluo Heaven sect become so rampant? Qiu, you better pray he hasn't gone far, so that Daluo Heaven sect could make up for this. Otherwise, you will be sacked from the law-enforcing elder position. Ling Han scolded him with a raspy voice, such a good-for-nothing. Scolded by Ling Han heavily, Qiu lowered his head and dared not to look at him at all. He knew he was in trouble this time. He had never thought that such a young man who was about 20 years old at most could have such a background. Elder Ling Han, there he is. Jian, who followed as well, shouted suddenly. Ling Han immediately looked down and found a black-robed man with a long sword on his back sitting quietly at the top of a mountain, who seemed to be waiting for them. Thank God, he is waiting for us, things aren't going so bad. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Jian Wushuang, then he and others landed slowly in front of Jian Wushuang. Fellow swordsman, I am Ling Han. Ling Han said with a humble voice. Jian Wushuang, sitting cross-legged on the ground, opened his eyes slowly. Then he closed his eyes again after glancing at them, saying, such an arrogant Daluo Heaven sect, it's hard to imagine what would become of you if you are one of the 8 top sects in Nanyang continent. I must give you an apology for the oversight. Ling Han played up to Jian Wushuang with a smile, then he glanced at Qiu next to him, come over here. Qiu walked to Jian Wushuang in dejection and apologized, Mr. Swordsman, please excuse me for having offended you just now, I'm so sorry. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, glanced at Qiu. Daluo Heaven sect is big and well-off and will soon replace Wilderness Sword sect as one of the 8 top sects in Nanyang continent, how could you care about a young man? Qiu was embarrassed. Qiu. Ling Han looked at Qiu and shouted, from now on, you are removed from law-enforcing elder and will be punished by sweeping the floor in front of the mountain gate. Even if a normal gold core disciple comes to learn, you have to lead him into the sect respectfully. If you do it well, in 3 years, I will consider reinstating you, understand? Hearing this, Qiu stood in astonishment, then he nodded vigorously. After punishing Qiu, Ling Han turned to Jian Wushuang with a smile, fellow swordsman, what do you think now? Jian Wushuang raised his head, looked at Ling Han in surprise and then nodding slightly, you are a reasonable elder in Daluo Heaven sect. Since we have cleared the air, would you like to come over to have a chat? Ling Han invited him. Okay, Jian Wushuang didn't refuse him this time. Led by Ling Han, Jian Wushuang went to the Daluo Heaven sect and walked into the same hall. In the hall, Ling Han and Jian Wushuang sat on 2 chairs respectively. Qiu, Jian, and others were waiting outside the hall. Swordsman, you are the one alchemy school sent to give Daluo Heaven sect a helping hand, aren't you? Ling Han looked at Jian Wushuang with a smile. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded, but what can I do? Jian Wushuang was curious about that. Daluo Heaven sect, which was strong enough to be a match for Wilderness Sword sect, had lots of powerhouses including some in the Saint Realm. Is there anything which they could not do that needed his help? Here is the thing, Ling Han explained to him. You might know that this time Daluo Heaven sect and Alchemy School are going to root out Wilderness Sword sect together. However, not only does it require absolute power, but also a reasonable excuse is needed, after all, it is one of the 8 top sections. An excuse? Jian Wushuang frowned, Alchemy School and Daluo Heaven sect could root Wilderness Sword sect out directly, why would you need an excuse? You might not know that the 8 top sects in Nanyang continent were a group. If Daluo Heaven sect and Alchemy School rooted Wilderness Sword sect out without any excuse, the Daluo Heaven sect would be expelled by the other 7 top sects and cannot rank among the 8 top sections. Besides, Wilderness Sword Sect is backed by Holy Emperor Palace. If we attack Wilderness Sword Sect without any reason, Holy Emperor Palace will not leave the matter at that. Ling Han explained. So is that it? Jian Wushuang understood, but how do you find an excuse? Chapter 266, Questioning. Chapter 266, Questioning. It's quite easy to find an excuse. Ling Han said with a smile, in 3 days, Wilderness Sword Sect and Daluo Heaven Sect and many other old sects in northern region will hold a competition for disciples. It's held every year, and disciples of these sects under 30 years old are qualified. This year, the best genius of Wilderness Sword Sect is called Chen Feng, son of Wilderness Sword Sect Master. Oh. Jian Wushuang realized what Daluo Heaven Sect needed him to do. Wilderness Sword Sect Master is strong and steady, but his Achilles heel is his son. Once his son dies, he will go mad, said Ling Han. Jian Wushuang asked, so you want me to kill him in the competition? Yes, Ling Han nodded. It happened in the past that some disciples were killed during battles, they didn't mind too much. Therefore, if you kill Chen Feng accidentally, you will not be blamed. Don't worry about your identity. There are so many disciples in Daluo, it's normal for a genius appears. What we only worry about is Chen Feng's strength. Ling Han stopped, then he continued, Chen Feng has great talent and his cultivation of spiritual power has reached peak of the Yang Void Realm. Only one in Daluo Heaven Sect could be a match for him, but he is incapable of killing him, that's why we sought help from Alchemy School. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded. Daluo Heaven Sect needed an excuse to deal with Wilderness Sword Sect. If Chen Feng was killed in the competition, Wilderness Sword Sect Master would go mad and do something crazy. Therefore, Daluo Heaven Sect would have a good excuse to fight back. Do you agree? Ling Han looked over at him. I have one condition, replied Jian Wushuang. What is it? Ling Han didn't turn a hair. On my way here, I was curious about a sword skill called Sword Realm which Jun-Yi brandished when we fought with each other. I study sword principle, so I want to have a look, could I? Jian Wushuang said. Jian Wushuang was curious about it and at the same time he looked forward to it. Sword Realm. Ling Han raised his eyebrows. It is an extraordinary sword skill of high 3rd grade and even could be a match for a low 2nd grade, which is a high-level sword skill in Daluo Heaven Sect. In general, outsiders could not get it, but... In the next breath, Ling Han said, you are not an outsider strictly, if you promise to help us kill Chen Feng in the competition, what will a sword skill of 3rd grade be? Okay, no problem. Jian Wushuang agreed. Ling Han smiled, and then he asked in an intentional way, by the way, you look very young, how old are you? My age. 21 years old, answered Jian Wushuang. He was over 20, certainly he could say he is 21 years old. 21. Ling Han frowned. How strong could he be at such a young age? May I know your cultivation of spiritual power level? Ling Han asked. Though Ling Han was the 9th elder of Daluo Heaven Sect, his cultivation was at half-saint and did not reach the saint realm yet. Besides, Jian Wushuang was good at hiding his level because he cultivated heavenly creation skill. So he couldn't tell which level Jian Wushuang was at. Jian Wushuang didn't answer him, but his spiritual power spread after a quick action. As soon as his power was unleashed, Ling Han perceived it. Initial Yang Void Realm. Ling Han frowned more. Chen Feng was at the peak of the Yang Void Realm. Does Elder Ling Han think I am not strong enough? Jian Wushuang looked over at him with a smile. No, Ling Han shook his head, smiling, since you are recommended by Alchemy School, there must be a reason. Okay. Jian Wushuang smiled and didn't say more. Friend, let me take you to the place you shall live in. Ling Han brought Jian Wushuang to a courtyard. In the night there was a full moon. The main meeting hall of Daluo Heaven Sect was closed. Daluo Heaven Sect's master and many elders gathered here, among whom 4 were experts of the Saint Realm. Everything is ready and experts of the Saint Realm of Alchemy School will arrive in 2 days, waiting for the start. Daluo Heaven Sect's master, a handsome middle-aged man, said in a deep voice. Elders in the hall were all excited at hearing that. They had waited for this day for so long. Elder Ling Han, did the genius sent by Alchemy School arrive? The middle-aged man looked over at Ling Han. He has come, but, though Ling Han nodded, his expression was strange. What? The middle-aged man asked. The genius called Swordsman, he is only 21 years old, more importantly, his cultivation of spiritual power is at initial Yang Void Realm. Ling Han said. Initial Yang Void Realm, the middle-aged man's eyes turned cold. Most of the Daluo Heaven Sect elders presented were also dissatisfied with it. What the hell is Alchemy School is doing, sending one of initial Yang Void Realm? There are many of initial Yang Void Realm in Daluo Heaven Sect, why would we seek for one more from them? Initial Yang Void Realm, no matter how strong he is, how could he kill an expert at the peak of the Yang Void Realm? Hearing their questioning, Ling Han frowned because he also doubted Jian Wushuang's strength. A powerhouse in initial Yang Void Realm, even if he is an exceptional genius, how strong could he be? While Feng, not only was he in peak of the Yang Void Realm, but he was also a nurtured genius in Wilderness Sword Sect. We have prepared so much for this day, any failure is not allowed in the final push, the handsome middle-aged man said with a cold voice. Elder Ling Han, try to figure out his real strength, you can send some geniuses to test him, openly or secretly. Figure out whether he is really in defiance of the natural order, otherwise, we have to make other plans as soon as possible. Yes. Ling Han nodded and left immediately. Chapter 267, Potential. Chapter 267, Potential. Dim moonlight shone over the earth. Ling Han came to the courtyard where Jian Wushuang lived, followed by a noble and dignified young man. Listen, Yi Sei, try your best to make that man battle with all his strength. You can invite him to fight with you, if he doesn't agree, you can force him to do so, but do not hurt him too badly, understand? Looking at the young man, Ling Han warned. The young man was called Yi Sei, the strongest among the young generation in Daluo Heaven Sect. In the young generation of Daluo Heaven Sect, he was the only one who was capable of fighting with Feng. I got it. Yi Sei nodded slightly. As he was talking, he was ready to go to the courtyard. Wait a minute, suddenly Ling Han shouted to stop him. What happened? Yi Sei looked over at him. Ling Han didn't say anything, but his eyes had turned to the courtyard. They could see Jian Wushuang, wearing black, practicing swordsmanship alone. There was nothing special before, but when Ling Han saw Jian Wushuang practicing swordsmanship, his eyes narrowed by instinct. That is, the origin. Ling Han was shocked. As a powerhouse of half-saint level, he had comprehended the origin and he was familiar with it. He was not shocked that Jian Wushuang had comprehended the origin, but that while Jian Wushuang was practicing swordsmanship, the origin had inspired the force of the heaven and the earth. In the courtyard, Jian Wushuang was brandishing the sword freely. The sword light was sparkling under the moonlight. Those normal sword shadows seemed to shake the heaven and the earth. Each move inspired the source of heaven and earth. Motivating the heaven and the earth, this is potential. Ling Han's eyes were full of astonishment. It's weird, seeing Jian Wushuang practicing swordsmanship, Yi Sei also narrowed his eyes. Yi Sei, go to the hall immediately, bring the sect master and elders here. Ling Han told him. What? Yi Sei was shocked. Hurry. Ling Han spoke seriously. Yes. Yi Sei left, soon Daluo Heaven Sect's master and elders came to Ling Han. When they arrived, they were attracted by what was happening in the courtyard. This is motivating the source of heaven and earth? Potential, the first level of source enlightenment. How old is he? How could he reach such a level of source enlightenment? The sect master and elders were all shocked. There were 3 levels of source enlightenment. The first one was potential. Even though it was the first level, it was hard to reach. It would take a normal expert of the Saint Realm dozens of years to reach it. If one reached it, he would be recognized as a powerhouse in the Saint Realm. But now, they saw a young man, who was about 20 years old and his cultivation of spiritual power was in the initial Yang Void Realm, who had reached such a level of source enlightenment. Ling Han, he is the genius invited by alchemy school? An elder asked directly. Yes, he is. Ling Han nodded seriously. He is just 21 years old, how could he reach such a level of source enlightenment? The elder sighed with emotion. Among these people, sect master and 2 elders, who were in divine transcendence, both the 2 elders had not reached the potential level of source enlightenment. That is to say, Jian Wushuang's level in source enlightenment was higher than them both. While I'm just getting Yi Sei to sound out his real strength, I saw that. Therefore, I let him bring you here. Ling Han said. Well done, the sect master nodded. Even though his cultivation of spiritual power was in initial Yang Void Realm, he could fight with one in peak of the Yang Void Realm with his source enlightenment. Maybe he has other cards, perhaps he could really kill one at the peak of the Yang Void Realm. Hearing that, elders around him all agreed. Ha, I thought he was a normal person of initial Yang Void Realm, it turns out that I am wrong. Thinking about this carefully, it's beneficial for the alchemy school to wipe out Wilderness Sword Sect. How could they send a normal initial Yang Void Realm here? Though his cultivation of spiritual power is a little bit low, it's hard to judge his real strength. After seeing Jian Wushuang's performance in source enlightenment, those elders who were not satisfied with Jian Wushuang's low cultivation of spiritual power changed their attitude. It was incredible for a 21-year-old youth to reach the potential level in source enlightenment. Compared with that, it was easier for one in initial realm of Yang Void Realm to kill one at peak of the Yang Void Realm. By the way, did the young man request for something when he promised to give us a helping hand? The sect master asked. Yes, he asked for the Sword Realm. Ling Han replied. Give it to him, the sect master said smilingly. Give it to him now, the competition will start in 3 days. If he could comprehend the Sword Realm, his strength will improve and he would be much more capable of killing Feng. Yes, master. Ling Han nodded. After taking the Sword Realm, he went to Jian Wushuang. In the courtyard, Jian Wushuang had stopped practicing, he stood there, closing his eyes. Potential, lift the heavy as if it is light, motivate the heaven and the earth. I was wondering how it motivated, now I know it is the origin that motivates the source energy. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes with a smile. These days he was studying the first level of source enlightenment, potential. Just now, something flashed in his brain, it happened. People would be jealous if they knew how he got it. After all, so many powerhouses, including some experts of the Saint Realm, went to great pains but failed. However, Jian Wushuang reached it by random inspiration. Of course, this was because Jian Wushuang had great talent in meditation. But partly also because of his Sword Soul. Sword Soul not only made it easier for him to comprehend Sword Essence, but also played an incomparable role in origin comprehension. Chapter 268, Let the Games Begin. Chapter 268, Let the Games Begin. I'll prove myself to be worthy of Sword Soul. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth raised, originally during the destruction of the bloodline of Sword Ancestor and all of its extreme power, none of the ordinary disciples paid any mind to the mansion of Sword Marquis. However, when the awakening of a genius with Sword Soul appeared, they immediately sent someone to dispose of him. Sword Soul truly is extraordinary. Sword Soul not only allowed him to grasp Sword Essence faster than ordinary people, but he could also sense the origin at a similarly fast rate as well. It wasn't surprising then that when that mysterious man had been sent to seize his mother and father, he had used the Sword Soul's Jian Nantian to wrest them away. He's grasped the origin up to this level, however my strength has also increased by no small amount. Jian Wushuang thought. Suddenly, as he raised his head he saw a figure descending into the courtyard. Swordsman, my friend. Ling Han said with a smile. Elder Ling Han, what have you come at such an hour to find me for? Jian Wushuang glanced over. Just then, as he had been practicing his swordsmanship, he had faintly sensed that someone was around. Now he could see that this had been the case. Does my friend the swordsman not want my Daluo Heaven Sect's sword realm? I've come here just for this purpose. As he spoke, Ling Han took a tome out from the interspatial ring and handed it to Jian Wushuang. Sword realm. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up, but then he laughed. I thought that the Daluo Heaven Sect would hand me this only after the task was completed. Ling Han laughed, but inwardly he felt embarrassed. Previously they indeed had planned to hand him the sword realm after Jian Wushuang had completed the task of beheading Chen Feng. However, just a moment ago they had seen Jian Wushuang's understanding of the origin, causing them to temporarily change their minds. My friend Swordsman, there are still 3 days remaining. You can take this sword skill and study it well, perhaps it will have numerous benefits for you. I won't bother you any further today and take my leave. Ling Han left immediately after he was finished speaking. Jian Wushuang immediately began to flip through the tome. After some time, Jian Wushuang closed the tome. Sword realm, not bad. Jian Wushuang said with a grin. Sword realm truly was a rather unique sword skill. It would propel the sword essence into becoming a small-scale realm of sword essence, and would constantly attack and hinder the opposition. Even though it was quite difficult to accurately read an opponent, with this you could exert a tremendous influence over them. That time when Jian Wushuang had fallen into Jun Yi's realm of sword essence, it was as if he had fallen into a deep quagmire, and it had become significantly more difficult to move. Also, the sword realm had 3 types, sword fog, sword tide, and sea-like sword form. As Jun Yi had implemented the sword fog, it was only the first move of the sword realm. Grasping this first move was not difficult at all. However, the second move sword tide and third move sea-like sword form were not as simple. Once in the Daluo Heaven Sect there were quite a few people studying these sword skills, but the majority of them could only reach the level of sword fog. Very few could reach sword tide, and as for sea-like sword form, the Daluo Heaven Sect had never had any person who was studying the sword realm reach that stage. I'm afraid the reason that the Daluo Heaven Sect has given me this sword realm tonight is that they want me to grasp this move sword fog within these 3 days. After 3 days when I battle Chen Feng, he'll have grasped some higher level moves. Jian Wushuang sneered. He also guessed there existed some doubt amongst the people in the Daluo Heaven Sect in regards to his power, but he didn't care. He would handle this. After 3 days, he would kill Chen Feng and with the matter settled he would leave. As for how the people in the Daluo Heaven Sect saw him, he couldn't care less. 3 days' time passed quickly. Every year all of the old sects in the northern region would hold the first meeting of the disciples, and it had begun. In the early morning as the sky glimmered with the first light of dawn, a few genius disciples from the young generation of the Daluo Heaven Sect as well as Jian Wushuang arrived at the giant martial arts practice field, Ling Han craning his neck to see all the way. The martial arts practice field was already packed with spectators who had come to see this coming together of so many experts. The geniuses from the Daluo Heaven Sect sat down in the seats at the top row of the martial arts practice field, but Ling Han had left for the moment. Jian Wushuang was also close behind as he sat down in the back row, his eyes slightly closed. The genius disciples from the Daluo Heaven Sect that were around would glance at him from time to time, odd expressions on their faces. Senior brother you say, who is this? Is he also a disciple of our Daluo Heaven Sect? Why have I never seen him before? A disciple couldn't refrain from inquiring. Shut up, don't ask questions. Yisei chided and said no more. As the Daluo Heaven Sect had been planning this matter, only the elders of the highest level were aware. Yi Sei was the first person amongst the younger generation of disciples and the only person who was qualified to contend against the genius Chen Feng. He knew about this matter and knew all about Jian Wushuang's identity. As for the other geniuses however, including Jun Yi, they knew nothing. Just then, a row of a dozen or so people slowly came out of the void and onto the martial arts practice field. When these people appeared they immediately drew the attention of all the experts of all the sects in the martial arts practice field. These dozen or so people, they came from the Wilderness Sword sect. Even though the Wilderness Sword sect had declined much in recent years, they were still overlords in this northern region and were still number one of the top 8 sections. Even though the Daluo Heaven sect's strength was sufficient to go up against the Wilderness Sword sect, when faced with the might of their reputation, it started to feel like they were a bit inferior to them. Due to this, the Daluo Heaven sect always wanted to take the place of the Wilderness Sword sect. This group of people was headed by a baby-faced purple-haired man. He had a slender frame, and there seemed to be some arrogance in his appearance. After he had sat down and seen the geniuses from the Daluo Heaven sect, the corners of his mouth had perked up. Yi Sei, long time no see, the purple-haired man said with a smile, but as he raised his head, you could sense that he was looking down on them. Chen Feng. Yi Sei raised his head and glanced at the purple-haired man. It has been a long time. It seems that the two of us have never fought either. In today's match, you must lose too terribly. Chen Feng said as if he was joking. Yi Sei's eyes narrowed, and he didn't respond. Chen Feng also didn't press. Afterwards his gaze moved and concentrated on Jun Yi. Seeing Jun Yi, a look of surprise spread across Chen Feng's face. Jun Yi, it's been a long time for the two of us as well. I heard that you were outside training and in the course of your training you ran into a conflict with a middle-sized empire. What's wrong? Did you sustain any injuries? What middle-sized empire would dare disrespect you? Tell me, I'll send someone to take care of them and give them a taste of your wrath. It's just a misunderstanding between me and that middle-sized empire, there's no real conflict at all. I can only express my appreciation for your kind gesture. Jun Yi sat with an ice-cold expression, appearing utterly detached and indifferent. Oh, so it's like this. Chen Feng nodded, but then smiled. Then you should be careful. If you run into any issues, let me know directly. If I run into any trouble, I have my own sect's senior brothers or elders. I won't cause you any trouble. Jun Yi said coldly. Hearing this, Chen Feng's face brightened like before and seemed full of delight, but there was a certain foreboding in his eyes. After he turned around, his face changed and became distorted. He cursed quietly, filthy bitch, sooner or later there will be a day where I'll make you kneel down in front of me and obey. Chapter 269, Chen Feng. Chapter 269, Chen Feng. He's Chen Feng. Sitting in his chair, Jian Wushuang had also seen the purple-haired man. However, Chen Feng only had eyes for Yi Sei and Jun Yi. He hadn't paid him any mind at all. The gathering would begin soon. The process for this gathering between the disciples of the various old sects was exceedingly simple. They would simply go out onto the martial arts practice field, and every sect's genius disciple could make contact with whomever they wished. Whoever you wanted to fight with, you would step in front of them and ask for a fight. For the most part none of them would refuse. They quickly went out onto the martial arts practice field and each match began amongst the disciples. In the beginning, Jian Wushuang watched with keen interest. He had to say, the theory and power of these old sect geniuses was not ordinary. Whether it was their cultivation of spiritual power or realization of various concepts, they were all significantly stronger than the geniuses of the 12 northwestern dynasties. However, after watching 3 matches, he lost interest. The reason was simple: in all of the fights between the disciples, they pulled their punches. It was merely an ordinary battle in order to compare notes with one another, none of them were true life-or-death brawls. When he had been a part of the easternmost hunting in the beginning of the Tianzong dynasty, the selection battles were all life-or-death struggles from the start. For the sake of gaining the favor of the old sects, everyone used every last ounce of their strength in order to attempt to kill their opponent. A great number of experts perished. The cruelty of the easternmost hunting was extreme compared to this so-called gathering of disciples. In comparison to the easternmost hunting, even though the level of power of the disciples in this gathering between the old sects was quite high, the nature of the whole event was completely different. Swordsman, my friend, what do you think of these sects' geniuses? Ling Han glanced over. They're all right. Jian Wushuang responded unenthusiastically. Ling Han raised his eyebrows and said no more. Half the day passed quickly. During this period of time, there were no less than a dozen of these matches where the old sect disciples took notes and learned from one another. However, despite the fact that there were so many confrontations, the most disastrous event was merely that one genius sustained an injury. In all of the other matches, they pulled their punches and didn't overdo it. Every sect's disciple has come out, all that's left is our Daluo Heaven sect and the Wilderness Sword sect. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. Yi Sei, it's almost time. Ling Han looked at Yi Sei, who immediately nodded his head in understanding and then stood up. As he got up, nearly all eyes in the entire martial arts practice field were on him. Yi Sei's coming out to the arena. Ha! Finally the climax of this gathering of disciples has arrived. We've been here all day, finally there's something worth seeing. All of the sect experts in the arena sighed. After Yi Sei stood up, he quickly walked into the center of the martial arts practice field and directed his gaze towards the Wilderness Sword sect. Chen Feng, come out. Out of all of the young generation disciples in all of the sects of the northern region, only you can battle with me. Yi Sei's voice carried forward, echoing throughout the interior of the entire martial arts practice field. Even though his words were somewhat arrogant, there was no expert from any sect in the entire arena who was rubbed the wrong way. After all, Yi Sei spoke the truth. After hearing Yi Sei's words, that baby-faced purple-haired man who was in the midst of the Wilderness Sword sect stood up. Chen Feng. Beside him, a voice rang out. It came from the tall and sturdy middle-aged leader of the Wilderness Sword sect. The cultivation of this tall and sturdy middle-aged body was at the half-saint level, and he was an elder of the Wilderness Sword sect as well. This gathering of the disciples would happen once every year. It was just an ordinary occasion to exchange ideas and compare notes, so many of the sects from the northern region didn't attach a great deal of importance to it. The Wilderness Sword sect was like this as well, so ordinarily an expert of the Saint realm would not make an appearance. Be careful, and for the honor of our Wilderness Sword sect, defeat this Yi Sei, the tall and sturdy middle-aged man said. Elderly, you can rest easy. Chen Feng said confidently. Soon after he appeared atop the martial arts practice field. In merely an instant, Chen Feng and Yi Sei were trading blows. The power of these two was far stronger than the rest of the geniuses in the gathering. As they fought, the activity was enormous and it attracted the gaze of everyone. Even Jian Wushuang looked over in this moment. Not bad. Jian Wushuang watched the fierce battle between the two of them. The two of them had already been fighting for some time. They had fought to a standstill, and Jian Wushuang had a definite understanding of their strength. Either of these two is much stronger than Mo Lingtian whom I killed. However, power has its limits, and even though their realization of some concepts are exceptionally high, neither of them has comprehended origin. Jian Wushuang said inwardly. Origin was far greater than any high-end concept. In the entire Nanyang continent, the amount of those who had grasped the Yin-Yang Void Realm's origin was incredibly scarce. It seemed in the ancestor's land, the first trial was to allow him to grasp the origin of the Yin-Yang Void Realm. Even though Chen Feng and Yi Sei could be considered first-class geniuses in the Nanyang continent, the distance between their grasping of the origin still left them coming up short. Swordsman, my friend, what of Chen Feng's strength? Are you sure you can face him? Ling Han looked towards Jian Wushuang. I'll kill him, I'm sure. Jian Wushuang replied with indifference. He spoke the truth. At peak of the Yang Void Realm cultivation, but to still have not yet grasped origin, even if it had been a month ago it wouldn't have been hard for him to kill this Chen Feng. However, now that he had attained the level of source enlightenment, his power has increased exponentially. Killing him would be even easier. Ling Han furrowed his brow and a smile revealed itself on his face. At this moment, in the middle of the martial arts practice field, the battle had reached a fever pitch. There was the sound of a violent clash, and in the wake of it there was finally an outcome in this confrontation between the two of them. Yi Sei's face was pale as he stood there, and remnants of blood were on the corners of his mouth. "Ha, Yi Sei, your strength, is that all you've got?" Chen Feng stood tall and upright, as arrogant as he had seemed before in the void. He looked at Yi Sei with a high and mighty air. "Humph, you got lucky." Yi Sei feigned anger as he snorted coldly, then turned and walked back towards the direction of the Daluo Heaven sect. "Senior brother Yi Sei." Junyi stood up and came over, astonishment in his eyes. "How could you lose to Chen Feng? Your finishing blow obviously still hasn't come to full fruition." "Don't ask so many questions." Ling Han immediately chided. Junyi was startled, and his brow furrowed more deeply. Yi Sei glanced at Ling Han, who nodded, "Relax." Yi Sei sat down and lightly let out a breath of air. He aimed his gaze at Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Ling Han also looked towards Jian Wushuang. "Swordsman, my friend, you're up." Ling Han began to speak. "I'm a man of my word, and I keep my promises." Jian Wushuang stood up. "Be careful, Chen Feng's power isn't so simple. Even though just then I didn't do my utmost, I could sense that if I had it still wouldn't be easy to defeat him." Yi Sei warned. "I'm not you." Jian Wushuang laughed insipidly, then strode towards the martial arts practice field. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.